The main character realized she couldn't breathe. Suddenly, rough hands grabbed her clothes and jerked her upward. Then the man slammed his fist into her face, shouting that her carelessness ruined his family's fate. The man was furious. She tried to commit suicide the day before their wedding. The main character stared at him confused when he called her Haley, but she had no idea who Haley was, because her name is Connie Che. Her grandmother had heard enough of her granddaughter's weirdness and snapped, "Why are you doing this again? There's no one here." The kid keeps seeing things, and the adults start thinking she's possessed. There's a spiritual shaman in Chunam, so the woman suggested sending the girl there. He'll fix this for sure. Nobody could figure out why the gods saved her. She's scrawny and useless. Aiche was abandoned by her parents right after birth and saw things no child should ever see. Grandma Youngsun took her in, but the girl lived by doing chores. But now the girl had never seen this place before and had no idea who the man screaming at her was. But Yije realized she was trapped inside Healy's body. The main character couldn't feel the original owner's presence at all. Suddenly, every sound cut dead. She froze mid-step. Healy's memories started flashing around her, one after another, all set underwater for some reason. The main character finally got it. Healy had thrown herself into the water on purpose. Yije didn't just possess a body. She'd taken over a dead girl's corpse. Meanwhile, the guy started shouting even louder. This brat wasn't even listening to him. The memories Yije saw? That was Healy's dad, Duke Duncan. He was furious. His clueless daughter had no idea how much he'd sacrificed for this engagement. A guy's voice cut through the chaos, smiling as he called this a rare spectacle. Duke Duncan froze in place. He shoved his daughter hard, sending her flying. Now he understood exactly how the dukedom handled discipline. He told Duke Duncan to get lost. His precious fiancée needed him. When the father didn't move, the guy stepped up, voice icy. "Beat it! This guy's in Healy's memories. The groom, this country's ruling monarch." But the girl, now Haley, had never seen so many vengeful spirits, and her body was shaking hard from it. She didn't get what the guy had done to end up surrounded by them like that. The guy tilted his head slightly and asked why she was shaking so much. Haley obviously couldn't stay calm, seeing all those terrifying ghosts hanging around him. Meanwhile, the guy sighed and told his fiancée to stop shaking in front of him, because he wasn't going to kill her. The protagonist remembered that Haley had committed suicide the day before the wedding, which caused a huge scandal. She told her fiancé his words were making her shake even more. Those words made the hero laugh. He lifted her chin and explained he'd just come to talk, since they'd only exchanged a few words before. But the hero didn't get it. If she really didn't want this marriage, why would she give her life for it? She didn't know the answer, because Haley's memories weren't finished yet. The heroine didn't want to die, so she answered with doubts. Though it wasn't like she hated it. She froze when her fiancé asked if she still couldn't forget another man. Kwan Yuije had never had someone like that in his life, but Haley did. But now his fiancé's heart belonged to some guy he didn't care about. He wants to support her true love, but the guy doesn't want to go down in history as a sad king. His words left the main heroine looking surprised and confused. Meanwhile, the hero firmly lifted Haley's chin and told her she needed to keep living. But if she's hell-bent on dying, she should put on the crown first. The main heroine realized she was the one who was unhappy no matter where she went. The girl can see ghosts and was once taken in by Grandma Yongsan, a renowned seer. Grandma was careful with visitors to keep the spirits from causing harm and wasn't at all shy with her words. She told her granddaughter to avoid water at every opportunity. The heroine had spent her whole life trying to ignore the spirits until she came to in Haley's body. Then she met a guy dragging a whole legion of spirits. Now he was offering her the crown, even though in her past life, Iche was just a mountain worker. The spirits are watching her, which means they're waiting for her answer. Don't make eye contact with them. Haley decided to steel herself to ask just one thing. If she turns down his offer, what's going to happen then? The king replied thoughtfully. The wedding was pushed back because the bride caught a nasty cold. If Haley backs out, now the reason won't be a cold, but a fatal illness. Well, then I'll have to die. The hero found her reaction kind of funny. Now Haley had to answer. Was she going to jump in the water again or make a smart move this time? Haley shook her head no. She wasn't about to walk away from her life. At least not until the groom said, "Until she puts that crown on her head, this won't happen." And that's the promise she could make. The hero mulled it over, but decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. But his face told a different story. No one could blame him who'd believe someone who almost died yesterday over their own stupid stunt. The king grinned and said he could let his bride's mistake slide this time. Then he snapped his fingers and had Duke Duncan brought in right away. Not long after Haley's old man came back into the room. Hell, He was damn pissed that in his own damn mansion, he had to follow someone else's orders. The kid slammed his sword sheath on the floor and told the Duke this was his one and only warning. His daughter was about to become Cayenne's queen, exactly what the Duke wanted, which meant he couldn't touch her, however he damn pleased anymore. But if the Duke ever tried to lay a hand on her again, he'd better remember whose face to look at first. Haley froze at the violent aura radiating off her fiancé. The main character knew he wasn't kidding. He could actually kill the Duke. The dark-haired guy cursed inwardly, feeling that familiar rush. But he quickly got a hold of himself and demanded the Duke's response. Head of the Duncan family grudgingly nodded to His Majesty. Haley couldn't believe what she was seeing. If her fiancé was a normal man, he'd be losing it right now. But he's holding it together by sheer force. The girl froze the second the dark-haired guy offered her his hand. She just now realized she was still kneeling, so she placed her hand in His Majesty's, taking his offer. But the hero didn't do anything else, leaving Haley to get up on her own, confused by her fiancé's moves. Suddenly, he grabs her hand and kisses her, asking if 4 days will be enough to shake off this cold. The scandal had blown up so bad there's no more waiting around. After getting the girls okay, His Majesty drops the bomb. It's his last act of mercy for the Duncan family. He pulls her close and pleads, "Haley Duncan, you better make it there alive, where I'll be waiting." Now the heroes got to head back to the castle. From now on, some royal knights are on duty, keeping Haley safe until the wedding. And they're keeping an eye on the Duke. No way he's touching the future queen. Roderick Peruse Blake runs the Cayenne Kingdom. Carrying all that karma and pain, he somehow stayed alive. So our heroine can't help but ask, what's her real deal? 4 days zip by, and here comes the big wedding day. A lot of folks are thinking something's gonna go down. Past brides had nothing but trouble. They say Duke Duncan's a total monster. Haley's got those rumors in her head. The memories are incomplete, with plenty of gaps. But we can be sure the king already tried to get married twice. He had one condition. They had to be a weak, noble family, not hungry for power. The first bride died in an accident. The second was poisoned. And the third barely made it out alive. But the heroine knew the third attempt failed too, because the real Haley drowned in a river. Roderick walked into the room and asked the bride if she had nice dreams, since it was her last night at home. Still, that house isn't worth missing. Haley hesitated, saying she had a good night. Surprisingly, nothing clung to her groom today, but the heroine remembered clearly. He'd been swarmed by angry spirits back then, so she didn't get it. If you squint, Roderick's face is actually kind of cute. Haley even felt a little jealous, honestly. The king caught his bride's intense stare, and his brows furrowed instantly. He grumbled, asking what she was doing. The heroine realized she'd been staring too long, and quickly looked away. She apologized to her groom, saying she was really nervous. Roderick exhaled wearily, and coldly announced he hated being lied to. The king knew for sure the lady wasn't even nervous. The main heroine clapped a hand over her mouth, realizing she'd messed up again. Roderick found her reaction amusing. She decided to be honest, admitting she was just trying to be careful around a high-ranking person. If she didn't hold back, she might make a mistake. Haley started panicking she was too honest, but the king told her to just keep doing what she was doing now. He got what she meant. A servant knocked and stepped inside, bowed low, and announced the time to leave had arrived. Roderick turned to the lady and told them it was time to move out. Taking His Majesty's hand, Haley linked arms with the king and walked toward the ceremony hall. Old habits were terrifying her. She'd never worn high heels or bulky clothes before, yet moved so naturally. Suddenly, she felt a breeze. Horror froze Haley's body the moment a terrible thought hit her. Sensing a different presence, the heroine lifted her head. A spirit sat atop a noble white horse, right above the priest's head. His face stayed serious, no emotion showing. Haley felt that powerful spirit for the first time. Now she was overwhelmed with confusion and mixed emotions. He didn't look like a ghost or evil spirit, but he was still high level. The creature's gaze suddenly shifted toward Haley. The girl quickly looked away, knowing if she engaged with him, trouble would follow. Roderick suddenly asked Haley Duncan, "What the hell is this nonsense?" The main character apologized, gripping her fiancé's hand tighter. This world is weird and dangerous. Hostile spirits probably roam these halls, so Haley needs to stay cautious. Midnight rolled around when First Squad Commander Jade suggested His Majesty consider their offer. Roderick scoffed. "Even if you're Duncan, this won't be easy. Jade, the First Squad Commander, is saying some damn ridiculous things." Despite what Roderick heard, she didn't seem that naive. Jade decided to ask if this was really that guy's doing. The deaths of the king's 2 brides are definitely suspicious, so the First Squad's captain assumed Haley's father, Duncan, deliberately got rid of all the competitors. Roderick's eyes went cold and calculating the moment Jade asked if the king blamed Duke Duncan for this. If the king's previous 2 brides hadn't been murdered, he wouldn't have had to marry into a powerful family like the Duncans. Duke Duncan openly lobbied for a royal marriage. Chances are he's the one who did it. But his own daughter tried to kill herself. She wasn't being hunted, and she never wanted to be queen. Still, that doesn't clear her dad. Keep watching the Duncans for now, and figure out how to use Haley to our advantage. Jade looked confused and asked His Majesty, "Aren't you supposed to be off by now?" Guess the first squad captain thought the king might dump his bride on their wedding night. But the king ordered another drink. Jade begged him to be gentle. His wife's still a young maiden stuck in a chess game. Roderick didn't reply. He just ordered someone posted in the queen's chambers to watch her. Jade accepted the order and told His Majesty not to worry about it. Roderick downed his drink in one go and slammed the glass back on the table with a loud clatter. Then the man stood up and headed for the door. "The king looks okay today." The first squad commander assumed the king's madness had probably calmed down. The king's been dealing with a nervous breakdown and severe insomnia. As the symptoms got worse, the rumors started spreading. So Jade silently prayed everything was okay with his ruler. Roderick strode confidently toward the room he needed. But the dark spirits caught up with him. Then the king started hearing the creature's insane laughter again, non-stop. He was even wondering why he felt so good. But now his head felt like it might burst. The main character glanced at her reflection in the mirror and wondered if her pajamas were too thin. Tonight was supposed to be their first wedding night. Never in Kan Yujin's life had this happened because she always hid in her village. It wasn't that she didn't want it. On the contrary, it could be considered a great opportunity. Ghosts of virgins and bachelors were especially offended. The heroine didn't get why this was such a big deal to them, so Haley decided she had to find out for herself. But all her excitement died the moment she spotted her husband at the room's threshold, arms crossed. Roderick clutched his head, still ringing like a damn bell. Haley didn't get it. Why so many evil spirits swarmed him like he'd rolled through a war zone or a graveyard? The king just dropped a bomb. She was now the queen. The Duke's a total stickler when it comes to his kid. Roderick perched on the bed's edge, while Haley's brain short-circuited. What the hell was she supposed to do? She lowered herself beside him, all awkward. Haley took the plunge and asked, "Your Majesty, are you with me?" He couldn't let those evil spirits' screams in his ear break him. She grabbed his shoulders, shaking like crazy. "Snap out of it!" Roderick lifted his head, blinking like he'd just woken up. He was already gone. So Haley started shaking the guy harder, while screaming loudly that he wasn't the kind of person he claimed to be. Roderick winced like he was in pain, which meant the main character's words finally got through to him. But the man lost consciousness and collapsed onto Haley's knees. Yet she could tell he was feeling way better now. This guy's got a solid physique. Sharp nose, strong jaw, perfect head shape. Plus, even if Roderick was weak, his energy was seriously impressive. Negative spirits shouldn't stick to someone like him. So why were they after him? Haley's grandma's words flashed through her mind. If she starts seeing spirits, they'll start seeing her. If she messes with the other world's business, it'll mess with her life. So she shouldn't do it. But this guy saved the main character from Duke Duncan, who was beating her up. All Haley can do is see spirits, and she's got a few tricks she picked up from her grandma. If she gets involved with spirits, she'll only end up hurt. But as a thank you, the main character could at least help him once. At least this person can get some solid sleep today. The evil spirits immediately realized this girl could see them. The main character ripped a piece of fabric from her nightgown, exactly what the ritual required. She wasn't sure if it would work, but she bit her thumb until it bled anyway. Fighting ghosts comes down to a battle of strength, so she drew blood symbols on the torn fabric scrap. Then she told the dead to leave because the living and dead worlds should never cross. Evil forces need to go back where they belong. The spirits started backing off after that. Breathing hard, Haley figured she'd done it. But instantly, she felt nausea creeping up her throat and a wave of dizziness. Haley didn't fully purify the space. She just scared the dead away for now. But they'll come back. She decided to stash the amulet under the bed. At least the king could get some peace tonight. Haley paid him back for his favor. The young woman suddenly felt weak all over, so she snuggled up next to the man and fell asleep. The next morning arrived. The heroine slowly opened her eyes and immediately saw a man right in front of her. She jumped when the king casually asked if she was awake yet, with that suspicious calm tone. Haley immediately scooted back sharply. The girl confusedly asked the man why he was staring at her so weirdly. He pointed at her torn nightgown. Haley instantly blushed bright red, while Roderick asked if it was his doing, since he couldn't remember any hot night with her. The girl immediately started flailing her arms, trying to explain there was absolutely nothing between them. Of course, she wasn't upset about there being nothing between them. Roderick threw the blanket and told the heroine to cover herself. If it wasn't him, the man wondered if maybe someone else was in the room. Haley didn't know how to explain, so she answered that she did it herself. Roderick didn't get the cause, so the girl explained she felt extremely hot and heavy in her sleep. The king pretended he hadn't heard any of that. Then he stood to leave, giving the girl permission to rest a bit longer. The door slammed, and Haley blushed even harder when the king acted like he hadn't heard a thing. So it wasn't him, Roderick thought to himself. His memories of last night were all broken up. He'd been sure he was losing his damn mind. But now his head was clear. Since Haley Duncan showed up at this castle, it had happened twice already. But this girl kept making weird excuses. 4 days had passed since then. After that awful first night, Haley hadn't seen the king again. She wasn't about to thank him, but weirdly enough, she felt a little sad. But there was no time to dwell on it now. The heroine decided to try crafting a decent amulet, but she didn't have the right ingredients. Ever since that night, the evil spirits had been giving her the creeps. They kept whispering that Roderick would chop her head off and she'd die screaming. But she'd already died once, way too harsh to do it again. She had to set up a barrier, which meant hiding a bunch of amulets behind picture frames and under furniture. Haley started regretting she didn't listen to her grandma and help the king. Suddenly, Haley heard a quiet sob. This didn't feel like an evil spirit. It had totally different energy. Haley walked over to the curtain and yanked it open. She froze instantly and stared down, shocked. A tiny glowing spirit sat on the floor, tears streaming from its eyes. Haley hesitated, then asked, "What are you doing here? Why aren't you going home?" But the kid said, "This is my home." Haley realized it wasn't evil. She promised, "I won't hurt you." The kid admitted, "I'm really scared, actually." Haley started panicking. Maybe her amulet was scaring the kid. Then Haley glanced at the cracked jewelry box. This thing looked over 100 years old. Old stuff usually holds someone's memories. So, this is the box's spirit. Maybe the box being broken is why he can't hide or use his powers fully. Haley apologized to the kid because she couldn't fix it. Her clumsy hands just weren't up to the task. But she promised to keep the creepy spirits out of this room instead. That was all she could manage. So the little ghost wouldn't have to be scared anymore. The kid agreed and insisted she leave whatever she was holding right there in his house. He circled her like a kid on a sugar rush, repeating his demand over and over. That sly little ghost had probably lived 300 years, not 100. Haley did what he asked, and suddenly the tiny spirit's face lit up with a goofy grin. I couldn't help but smile back. Guess this was the first time I'd actually felt happy since getting stuck here. 4 more days passed. Haley got sick from overexerting herself making those amulets. She'd pushed past her limits. Still a ton left to do to stabilize this place. I carved up a tree and made 1 bracelet, but that's barely a start. Need to carve a whole post and set it up in the room to boost protection. Roddy leaned in and asked, "What are you up to?" The main heroine dropped the amulet in fear. The maid told the king his wife wasn't feeling well, so Roderick grabbed some medicine and came to check on her. Then the man pointed out Deborah standing behind him. The heroine didn't expect that, and awkwardly thanked him for the care. She glanced at the door, realizing evil spirits couldn't get in. The barrier was working, but she couldn't stop the worst of them, so they needed to set up the pillar as fast as possible. Roderick decided to look at whatever his wife was messing with. Turns out it was just a thick, cylindrical stick. The king and the maid froze instantly. Deborah figured the newlyweds probably didn't do anything in their first night, but she never thought it'd be this bad. To Haley's shock, the king snatched her amulet, and the knife in her hand. The queen, fresh from jumping in the water, had a knife. That meant Roderick wouldn't just let it slide. So that thing got taken too. The heroine couldn't believe it. She needed to build the banishing pillar. Roderick headed for the exit, finally reminding the girl to take the medicine he brought her. He came to check out the knight's captain's report because it looked fishy. He found out the queen's room smelled like smoke, and a soldier managed to find some ash. Somehow, she tracked down a butcher's knife and started carving things every day. That's what kept Roderick from getting any peace. He had no clue what the hell it even was. The main girl collapsed onto her bed, completely drained. She was super messed up. She could have wrapped up the column in a couple days, but now it was all for nothing. At this point, Haley's stuck with nothing to do, so the main girl dug under her pillow and pulled out the book she'd hidden there a few days back. Might as well read this then. Haley Duncan's diary, which the main girl brought back from the duchy. The real Haley's birthday is on October 17th. The little spirit asked the girl how she could see him, since plenty of priests came through this room, but nobody saw a thing. But there are legit good priests who can see spirits. Those guys were probably just lying. They're faking the whole benefactor bit, leeching off you for cash, and if you so much as blink, they'll swipe it right from under your nose. But the kid reminded them she doesn't even have a nose. The MC grabbed this diary on purpose, hoping it'd jog her memory. Haley was living on autopilot. Deborah the maid suddenly knocks on the door. The MC sets the diary aside and tells the woman to come in. Deborah brings a letter from the Queen's estate. There were meds too, but the MC kicks them back. She's not sick anymore. But Haley snatches up the letter. The Duke's all worried about his daughter's health and claims he packed the meds in with the letter just to be extra thoughtful. But she's seeing right through this whole act. As a dad, the Duke wants to ask his daughter just one thing. Haley's curious now. The MC needs to get to the king ASAP, and from Deborah, she finds out he's in the audience chamber. Deborah also says she's on her way to fetch the Queen's attendants to get her all dolled up. Haley didn't know how to respond to the Duke. The original owner of this body, who was meant to be queen, had almost no emotions left. When a soul leaves, emotions leave with it. Only people with deep grudges or grand ideals break the rules. They become vengeful spirits or guardian spirits, staying in this world. The Duke knew plenty of people in the castle served the king, but he still wanted to send people from his own estate. Right then, in the reception hall, inside, a heated argument raged over the embezzlement of royal funds. Roderick had to sit through it all. The officials flinched when a sharp sound rang out. Then all turned to look at their king at once. Roderick coldly asked, "Have you said everything you need to say? Maybe there are still people in this room who haven't spoken up." Jade knew the king was extremely dangerous in this state. If things got worse, he'd have to stop him. 3 years into his reign, his dark side had been growing stronger. He seemed like a completely different person. 2 people accidentally witnessed the horror at the worst possible moment. Deborah suggested the queen return to herself, and Haley nodded in agreement. The protagonist decided to stay out of it, but evil spirits started gathering over the king, laughing loudly, and demanding they kill everyone in the room right now. This really worried Haley. Suddenly, the king grabbed his sword and started pulling it from the sheath. The protagonist flinched, saw that, and froze. The first squad leader jumped up immediately, determined to stop the king from making an irreversible mistake. But Haley was quicker. The evil spirits kept whispering their desires into the king's ears. The protagonist sprinted to His Majesty and grabbed his hand holding the drawn sword. In reality, Haley ran here without realizing it. She started blaming Deborah, who should have held her tighter. The moment Roderick heard Haley Duncan's voice begging him to listen, his clouded expression cleared. The protagonist noticed too. Light came back to the man's eyes. Only then did she realize the beads were the ones causing that effect. So the evil spirits backed off a little. The king locked in a surprised look at the young girl and whispered her name. He had no clue what just happened or why Haley Duncan had her hand around his. The man glanced at the officials, now silent, too scared to utter a word. Roddy gently yanked his hand free from Haley Duncan. Then he sheathed his sword. The heroine flinched as the king spun back around and locked eyes with her. He asked just one question, why? Haley froze. This was all his doing. Now, the look in his eyes said, don't make him say it twice. Haley actually came to discuss the letter Duke Duncan sent. Since he and the Duke were at odds, it'd stir up the king's bad vibes. Spirits would lose it. So Haley lied. She said she came just for tea. But she picked the wrong moment and quickly apologized for being rude. Roddy gave her a skeptical look as she explained she just wanted to thank him for the medicine. The officials have been really on edge the whole time. The heroine was mentally begging Deborah to help her out. The maid caught on fast and explained to His Majesty that the queen adored the fancy Rusharok tea. In the end, Roderick ordered tea for them, and Haley mentally declared Deborah the best. The king announced that today's meeting was over. Meanwhile, our heroes went off to have tea. The heroine took a small sip and immediately tasted something unpleasant, but tried to save face. Meanwhile, the king was watching her closely. Haley instantly felt awkward. She froze when His Majesty suddenly asked what she was even thinking right now. But what really interested him was why she did it, and why she kept drinking the bad tea. That guy quickly figured out Haley's game. The heroine wiped her lips and told His Majesty he couldn't judge her preferences. She said the same thing again. Haley once again realized the king wasn't really a harsh guy, and had no problem joking around. The problem is, he's got some seriously creepy spirits clinging to him. As soon as some guy sits far from her, those gross corpses start latching onto him. This dude was really making Haley uneasy. Either way, it's pretty gross to watch. So the main character walks up to the king and asks if he's been sleeping okay lately. Roderick shot back. You think it's that obvious I haven't been sleeping? Well, yeah, it was super obvious. The heroine gathers her courage. then plops down right next to His Majesty. She gently touches his hands and starts massaging the king's palms. The knights standing behind go wide-eyed. Their queen just pulled a move that could get her in serious trouble with the king. Roderick's face lights up with surprise. This is out of line. Everyone in the palace knows their relationship is basically frozen over. Jade hopes the king's mood doesn't blow up. Instead, Roderick smirks and asks, "What are you doing?" She says, "It helps you fall asleep faster." Haley admits she used to suffer from insomnia too. Roderick's smirk didn't fade. This girl wasn't even trying to hide her lie anymore. Haley realized now. The king's been tormented by evil spirits so long, his energy was all tangled and locked up. Someone with his kind of energy was deadlier like this. But Roderick still didn't get what she was doing. Haley knew better than anyone how energy moved through a body. Before the grandma's exorcism, the heroine's job was keeping that person's energy in check. She asked the king if it hurt. He said no. Haley started working on his back. Roderick zoned out and thanked her for the attention. People with strong energy wouldn't mess with vengeful spirits. Haley wondered just how many bad things this guy had done to earn their wrath. The heroine pressed a pressure point. Roderick instantly felt weird. Haley almost had the flow pinned. The man had no idea what was happening. Then warmth spread through him, and his eyes slowly drifted shut. His body went limp, and Roderick plopped his head on the heroine's thighs, sinking into a deep sleep. The energy flow picked up slightly. The king'll handle the evil spirit's assault a bit easier now. But the heroine still gave a silent apology in her head. She couldn't do anything else. First Squad's commander blinked in shock, asking if the guy was literally asleep. Haley shrugged. When you're exhausted and get a massage, tension drops. The king was probably wiped out. Jade blinked, confused. His Majesty hasn't slept in days. Plus, the king's been battling insomnia lately. First Squad commander is trying to recap what happened earlier. Haley said, "People can get super sensitive sometimes. Don't get worked up over it." He had no other option. The steward brought a blanket and gently covered the king. The man caught Deborah's disapproving glare. Time to grab another blanket for Her Majesty. But Haley shook her head. "Nope, we already drank the tea. Time to go." Roderick clung to the girl even tighter. Haley caught on instantly. Those people behind her were definitely up to something weird. Of course, something inside the main character gave her a chill. This guy, King Roderick, he just instinctively moves around searching for clean energy because of the amulets the main character has. Or maybe the pure energy. He's been suffering from dark, impure forces for a long time, so he's trying to find a peaceful spot. In the end, Haley asked for a blanket, and they brought it to her. Deborah grabbed it from the butler right away. Haley was tired too, and it wasn't the same as when she channeled her energy into making amulets. Being around this guy is exhausting, but for some reason, Haley felt warmth. Roderick blinked in confusion the moment he woke up and realized his situation, but he still decided to ask Jade about it. The First Squad leader reminded His Majesty that as soon as he had tea with the queen, she sat right next to him. But after that, the king immediately fell asleep. Jade decided not to mention how the newlyweds massaged each other before bed, because he just couldn't. Roderick shifted his gaze to the sleeping girl. He decided the queen needed to be laid in a comfortable spot, and the best place was his bedroom. Jade was stunned when he heard this. Meanwhile, the king explained it was necessary to avoid waking the queen since her room was far away. The butler and maid began to doubt there was nothing between the king and queen on their first wedding night, but Jade immediately exclaimed for them to hurry and follow His Majesty's orders. Deborah replied she'd go ahead and prepare the room right now. Roderick's physical condition suddenly improved again. He glanced at Haley Duncan and wondered who she even was. After a while, the main heroine came to and immediately assumed she'd somehow ended up in hell. Maybe she just died in her sleep or got reincarnated again. But her pink hair and pale fingers told another story. The main heroine was still in Heidi's body, meaning she was definitely alive. From the setting and swarm of evil spirits, the young woman concluded this was the king's room. She immediately wanted to leave. Deborah, the maid, stepped into the room as soon as she heard Her Majesty waking up from a long sleep. The main character miserably begged the woman to take her back to her room. In the end, Haley successfully escaped the haunted house, and on her way back, found out the king had asked to have her brought to his room. The girl thought it was funny and laughed. It was obvious the king was just trying to repay her somehow. Only now did Haley realize she'd forgotten to mention the letter. In her diary, the lady wrote that her father wanted to marry her off to the king, but she was madly in love with Lawrence. However, all the entries were short, and their context was odd. The main character wanted to know more about the real Haley. Taking the letter from her father in hand, The girl wondered how Haley would act if she were in her place. If you think about it, the king had proposed dinner today, and Haley was shocked by the sudden invitation. The main character walked to the window and caught herself thinking. She didn't want to die. The girl didn't get why the real, clueless Haley drowned. Clearly, fate was unavoidable. Even if you could skip a little trouble, you couldn't change the thread. Like the dead Haley, whose fate was to die. People always say they like their fate, but that's just those who can't see what's coming. The main heroine has never loved her fate even once. If you think about it, this is the first dinner between the king and Haley. Roderick didn't invite her to just have a good time together. A few days ago, the commander of the 1st Night Unit reported a letter Duke Duncan sent to the Queen. Jade brought a copy for the king to read. The letter talks about bringing in Duke's people to the palace, and the sender knows the Queen is sick. It's obvious Duke Duncan wants to plant his people in the palace. He knows Roderick won't approve, so he's trying to start a power struggle with him this way. The king needs to cut this off at the root now. That's why they wanted to install an insignificant noblewoman in the Queen's place. Roderick suggested using this opportunity to find out what Haley Duncan is really like. But the king had no idea how to start the conversation. These thoughts wouldn't leave Roderick alone. Jade knew His Majesty still wasn't feeling well today. The steward announced Her Majesty the Queen's arrival, and Roderick immediately looked up. His eyes cleared up instantly. He lifted his head and looked toward where Her Majesty's footsteps were coming from. The man stood up immediately and caught himself noticing the air around him, suddenly felt fresh. It happened the exact moment Haley showed up. He glanced at her thoughtful expression and caught himself noticing that with every step she took, a fresh breeze seemed to blow. Like another world was centered around her. Surprisingly, his headache was gone. The heroine looked puzzled at His Majesty as he took a deep breath. He said with a smile on his face, "This is really strange." Haley didn't know what was going on, and the king replied with a smirk, "You can walk through and sit down." The heroine followed his will. Roderick turned his focused gaze back to the girl. Haley gathered her courage and told His Majesty she wanted to say something, and the king let her. The heroine said that a few days ago, she received a letter from her father in the duchy. Jade, standing behind the king, hadn't expected the girl to bring it up. Roderick smirked at the thought that this girl had upstaged him, since he'd completely forgotten his original goal. She spilled the contents of the letter she'd brought along, just in case the king wanted to take a look. The king leaned back in his chair, dismissed it, and asked what her plan was. Haley was stunned the king was actually giving her the choice this time. He remembered the moment he'd let the girl die, only after she wore the crown. Otherwise, he'd do it himself. The king burst out laughing at her words. Jade was totally confused. Why was His Majesty giving in to the opponent's arguments? Haley frowned and grumbled. "Is this choice even fair this time?" Roderick chuckled again. "You're being so upfront. It's unbecoming." He realized he hadn't laughed like that in years. This girl was hilarious. Roderick let her keep going. From the vibe, the main character could tell everything was under control. She wasn't sure what Haley wanted, so she decided to lay out her own take first. She didn't want the king and duke pulling her strings, and she refused to treat the real Haley's life like a game. So the heroine decided she'd write her father a letter to turn him down. Those words caught His Majesty off guard. Haley hadn't been in the palace long, so from everyone else's perspective, this would look unfair. Jade was glad they wouldn't have to get into another pointless fight with the Duncans. But Roderick figured it was too soon to let their guard down. On the surface, this answer might look good enough. What surprised everyone was the Queen actually gave a reason for the refusal, instead of just blaming him. Even though Haley said no, it wouldn't be right to cut the Duke off completely. Anything could happen down the road. Adding, "for now," kept the door open for future negotiations. Roderick knew his wife was just playing innocent. She'd already thought of everything she needed. You could say she had the real stuff running through her veins. Just like a sly fox, Haley Duncan was one interesting woman. Still, she gave Roderick the creeps sometimes. The steward brought food, and she asked His Majesty if she could eat once they were done talking. Roderick told the heroine not to wait up for him from now on. The more he got to know her, the more she fascinated him. But with all this, things were starting to get a little risky. Even if just a little, Roderick was starting to feel drawn to Duchess Duncan's daughter. Maybe it was exactly because his madness had intensified. Grabbing a glass, the king remembered an important detail this week. He's planning a hunting trip, so he won't be at the castle. The main character froze at the news. According to the first of the God's 5 commandments, you can't take a life because it piles up karma. Roderick, the ruling beast of Peruse Blake, had a nickname based on his second name, and it's the Frenzied Beast. The nickname came from his madness. Knowing he couldn't control his urges, Roderick tried to channel them through hunting. But without realizing it, he kept pushing himself deeper into that madness. The more blood he saw, the more suffering he added from vengeful spirits. The main character looked at the king, who was asking the knights if they'd checked the supplies. Haley wanted to tell His Majesty that taking someone's life was a bad idea, but she knew he'd just think it's silly. Roderick turned his head and stared at the girl. Then he decided to ride over to her. The man spoke in a cold tone, asking if she wanted to say anything to him before he left. Haley caught herself thinking that outside the castle, the evil spirits stick less, and asked what he meant. Roderick suggested asking him to catch someone, but the protagonist refused the offer. The man then proposed wishing him a safe journey, and Haley did it. But secretly, she just wanted the king to stay put. Suddenly, he pointed off to the side and asked the protagonist if she wouldn't do the same over there. Haley shifted her gaze to the knight and the maid who was seeing him off. The man suddenly yanked her close and kissed her. The protagonist blushed instantly. Haley couldn't believe the king actually expects her to do something like that to him. Seeing her reaction, Roderick burst out laughing again. Smirking, he told her she was just joking. At that comment, Haley tensed even more until the king told her she was standing there with her mouth open. The protagonist puffed out her cheeks and looked away while the king said it was amusing. In a slightly hurt tone, Haley asked His Majesty to return unscathed, and most importantly, not to get hurt. Roderick smiled and replied he would. His behavior was starting to really get on the main character's nerves. The man suddenly closed in on Haley Duncan and whispered in her ear to stay clear of the water. He stepped back slightly, lingering for a split second, eyeing her, their lips way too close for comfort. Then he straightened up and asked if she got the message. Probably just scared she'll jump in like Haley. In other words, he didn't want her to die. The main character's ears turned red instantly and started itching like crazy. Roderick smirked and said he's got to go. Then he headed back to his knights. Watching him leave, the main character wondered if everything would be okay. Later, the first squad leader urged the king not to chase that boar. The night woods are dangerous. But Roderick ignored the advice and still took down the beast. Darkness in his eyes, every sound fades to silence. He knows he shouldn't have done it for the kingdom and his people. If she were here right now, things would be different. But now the evil spirits were still urging Roderick to kill as many animals as possible. Jade reined in his horse the moment they caught up to the king. The knights couldn't believe anyone in this world could be so cruel as to finish off a dead animal. Roderick was practically a different person now, as if all hope had vanished. The moment the leaves rustled, terror flashed across Jade's face. A massive bear stood right in front of His Majesty. The commander of the first night squad ordered the men to shoot the beast immediately, telling the king to step back. But Roderick didn't hear a word. In an instant, the man's eyes went entirely black. The night was deep, yet for some reason, the heroine couldn't fall asleep. If he kept killing, his condition would only get worse, and the heroine was terrified about it. But Haley didn't get why it was bugging her so much. In the end, the girl decided to take a walk. The moon was blazing bright, and soon Haley stepped into the garden of the huge castle. She spotted the lake nearby, but she wasn't heading that way. Not after what old Lady Youngson said. Maybe because she's been told her whole life not to go near water. The main character started just watching from afar. Haley decides to sit on the steps. Suddenly, a sudden gust of wind blows in. The main character's eyes widen the moment she senses a familiar energy nearby. The spirit she saw at the wedding is standing right next to her now. For some reason, he's gotten off his horse. Then the spirit just sits down beside her. Even the god her grandma worshipped wasn't like this, so Haley absolutely can't interact with him. But a smirk instantly appears on his face. The spirit asks if she can see him. The main character silently begs the creature to stop talking to her, like it's totally natural. Haley figures her best move is to just walk out. She's just about to get up when the spirit quietly drops that she's not the real Haley Duncan. The main character almost lets it slip, but somehow keeps her emotions in check. The spirit tells the young woman Roderick's coming here now. He's been hurt. Haley kept ignoring it, and the spirit added that it was probably a serious injury. But the king doesn't even have an heir, so no one knows what'll happen if he dies suddenly. Haley jumped up, startled by the spirit's words. The guy laughed and grinned, saying she could still hear him after all. The heroine snapped, asking if he was really trying to joke about someone's life now. Everyone always does this. Haley didn't get why they all did this to regular folks. The spirit smiled, told her to chill out, and added that Roderick was really hurt. Maybe it was just a lie. But Haley still couldn't do anything. The spirit told the queen to hurry. If she ran now, she'd just make it to see him. Then the thing just vanished. Haley needs to get to the castle right now. Where that guy is. The first squad leader told His Majesty the castle was in sight, and to hold on a bit longer. Roderick saw nothing but darkness and silently begged someone to help him. The main heroine was sprinting until she caught the scent of blood, meaning the king had returned. The knights rode straight to the butler and barked for the doctor to be woken up right away. Haley had no clue how the king had gotten stuck with another whole bunch of evil spirits. The knights ordered him taken straight to his bedroom without a clue that they shouldn't. The main heroine's mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Doubt gnawed at her, but she made up her mind anyway. She yanked her door open loud enough to jolt the little sleeping spirit awake. Then Haley dashed to the table and snatched up a few amulets. The little spirit blinked up at her, asking what in the world she was doing. When he saw she was aiming for the weird thing under the bed, he started begging her not to. Haley headed for the door, vowing to fix everything once she got back. The little spirit started bawling. Just woke up and already chaos. If his body and mind weakened, the evil spirits would grow stronger, and the king's life was already hanging by a thread. Haley prayed that'd be enough. When she reached the king's room, she saw he was still stabbing the already dead thing, bloodied sword clutched tight in his hands. The main character shoved aside all the servants demanding they let her through. One of the knights urged Her Majesty not to step foot in the king's quarters. Deborah sprinted over and demanded Haley return to her bedroom immediately. The main character reminded them she was the queen, which meant she could access any part of the castle. A doctor appeared behind the maid, barking at everyone to back off immediately. Haley slipped into the room with him. At the threshold, the young woman froze, stunned by the room's oppressive vibe. Monsters swarmed the space, howling in glee, and demanding Roderick kill someone right now. Fear made Haley cover her mouth. The first squad leader stared at Her Majesty in stunned confusion, not understanding why she came. He held out a handkerchief, telling the queen to cover her nose, since the room reeked of blood. But Haley refused, because it wasn't the blood smell. It was the negative energy. Only now did she notice the claw marks on the man's body. The injury wasn't serious enough to threaten his life. In other words, that arrogant spirit played a trick on her. The doctor freaked out the second Her Majesty collapsed to her knees. The heroine started berating herself for falling for the ghost's words again. She tensed up the second she heard His Majesty mutter something quietly while conscious. Only then did Haley realize he said, "Kill." The king was repeating exactly what the evil spirits had been drilling into him. Roderick's eyes were wide open, but fixed on nothing, completely ignoring everyone in the room. The queen and doctor tensed up the second His Majesty lifted his sword. If a soul wound counts as an injury, this man gets fatal wounds daily, but no one to explain the reason, and no one can heal him, Roderick's alone. The heroine grabbed the king's hand. The knight instantly tried to stop the queen. It was extremely dangerous. Roderick turned his eyes to the heroine the moment she anxiously asked how he was. He opened his eyes but didn't come to consciousness. Those evil spirits were way too strong. So Haley needs to start the fight first. Stick to the law without fail. The undead can't defeat what's right. The spirits immediately started screaming they won't let her rest if she keeps messing with them. At first, Haley didn't plan to get tangled up in ghost business, but now the opposite was happening. No one else in this world could help him, so the protagonist wasn't about to back down. She demanded the evil forces vanish right now. She had to handle this, period. Roderick was in total darkness. He couldn't see or hear anything. In the end, the hero, a truly mad king, was stuck in this darkness. But suddenly, Roderick saw light. He lifted his head and stared at the sky. Someone called him, and Roderick reached out with his hand, still wondering who it could be. The man had no idea whose beautiful voice it was. Coming to his senses, Roderick weakly moaned. Haley anxiously asked the king if he was okay, and if he could hear her voice. Roderick stared at the girl in shock as she asked another question. Could he see her? As soon as the evil spirits vanished, the king's sword crashed down to the floor. The main heroine softly said everything was okay now. The healer cleared his throat and said it wasn't a serious injury, so the king's going to be fine. Haley used up too much power and immediately felt nausea rising in her throat. Roderick spoke in a hoarse voice, asking the girl why she was here now. But the main heroine didn't have a clear answer either, and guessed she just got scared at the time. The king could have just said thanks for showing up, but Haley decided to keep quiet about it. Now that he was back to himself, the girl could head back to her room. But Roderick snatched her wrist suddenly. With sadness and hope in his voice, he asked Haley to stay just a little longer. In an instant, the king became very gentle, and since the queen showed up, everything felt like a dream. The heroine's heart was pounding, and she yanked her hand away, telling him not to push himself. Roderick's face fell. The main heroine knew this was coming. She started beating him with her fists, demanding he never go on a hunt like that again. Haley stopped as soon as the king asked why. His whole body was shaking, but Roderick still smiled and asked why he shouldn't go. With tears in her eyes, Haley answered, she loves animals a lot. Deborah and Jade decided the king had finally lost it. Roderick raised his hand, praised everyone for a good job, then asked everyone to leave except the queen. The main heroine realized her shame too late. She cursed herself for her actions and wondered why she was acting out of character. Roderick looked closely at the trembling girl. The main heroine stared at him in surprise when the man said he saw light in the darkness. Then he extended his hand. Haley grabbed it in response, just like now. In other words, the king had a dream when the main heroine was banishing evil spirits. Roderick figured the girl had seen a lot of scary stuff coming here, but he didn't want to linger on it. The truth is, there's nothing you can do about it. It might sound irresponsible and helpless, but Roderick admitted to Haley Duncan he couldn't do anything about it. So this guy knows exactly what's happening to him and how terrible it is. Yet his eyes stayed bright. Could those really be the eyes of someone who's built up bad karma? Haley couldn't pretend she didn't know when this guy was tearing himself apart alone. The king asked if she was mad at him for the trouble he caused, but the girl said she couldn't do that. Roderick replied, "You're Duncan, and you're the queen. If you're not mad, can you at least talk to me a little longer?" For some reason, Roderick felt himself coming back to life when she spoke. It was the heroine's energy and stuff like prayer beads and amulets, not her voice. But Haley still agreed to stay and started telling the king something. 2 days later at the royal castle, the queen was sick again, so Duke Duncan demanded they let familiar servants come to take care of her. This guy was back to his old tricks again. Actually, Haley had been working hard to rebuild the barrier in the bedroom and ended up getting sick. Meanwhile, Duke Duncan shouted, "My daughter can't make such requests!" Roderick reminded him, "She's not just your daughter, she's now the Queen of Cain. You need to address her properly." The Duke apologized for his rudeness, saying he was just thrilled by the news about his favorite kid. The king laughed at that. He remembered clearly how this father had slapped his beloved daughter in the face. However, if Roderick said anything like that here, the queen's authority could be damaged. Normally, a man wouldn't give it a second thought and just shoot him, but now there was a bad vibe. The Duke said that in that case, he'd meet the queen personally and ask for her permission. Haley's dad had this look on his face, like she'd obey his will because of her own weakness. But Roderick didn't get why these lowlifes thought she was some pushover. He smirked and shot back, "Does anyone stop you from meeting the queen?" Jade flinched and gave the king a confused look. Roderick let the Duke see his daughter because he knew she wasn't that kind of person. The first squad captain didn't get how the king could let the Duke meet the queen. Roderick didn't answer. Instead, he asked Jade if he was doing his job right. At the start of the investigation into the lady, he reported that Haley Duncan was called a pretty fool, but all that turned out to be complete nonsense. Roderick approached the queen's room and asked how she was doing. The little spirit tensed up immediately. King Roderick had brought those terrifying creatures again. The man stepped inside and told the girl to stay seated. He immediately felt surprisingly light. The heroine was proud. She'd finally managed to create an awesome barrier this time. Haley's health had just started to improve when she suddenly got sick again, as if punishing the king for going on a hunt. Roderick told the queen her father still demanded people be sent to the palace. Imagining the Duke's face, Haley laughed. With a smirk, Roderick warned that if she kept laughing, he'd turn into a petty scoundrel. Haley immediately covered her mouth with her hand. The man studied the girl's pale face closely. The queen was caught off guard when the king asked if he should assign Duncan family members to her. Jade was furious with his king's behavior. Haley reminded His Majesty he was giving her a choice again. She wondered why he was doing this. Roderick replied thoughtfully, admitting he didn't have the right answer. The guy decided he just wanted to test her reaction again. It's a nice feeling, thinking you're in control. The heroine shot back that she'd write another rejection letter, this time with a clearer message. Roderick had no clue what the girl was up to. He froze the second his eyes landed on the wooden figurine by Haley's bed. Everyone else froze too. The king leaned in, asking what she needed the thing for. Jade turned beet red. Deborah hissed to the butler. Nothing happened on the king and queen's first night, not a thing. Haley explained in an innocent tone, "It's just her hobby." She showed the king her bracelet and asked for her knife back to finish her masterpiece. Roderick grumbled that people usually prefer bigger ones. The heroine stammered, "Just because she's big doesn't mean she's strong." He replied in a tense voice, "It's true." But his was big enough. Even though Roderick had no idea what it was, he ordered it hidden. The blushing maid announced to Her Majesty, "It's time for your medicine." Roderick decided again. This girl was seriously weird. He looked annoyed, even a little hurt, as the main character drank that terrible medicine. His eyes began to droop. Haley turned a surprised look to the man. It turned out His Majesty had dozed off. The steward absent-mindedly asked how the heck to handle this sudden insomnia, since even sleeping pills didn't work on the king. The second the queen entered, Roderick relaxed completely. Jade wondered if the rumors about the Duncan family's blood hiding some secret power were actually true. Haley yanked the king's leg, jolting him awake, and scolded him for dozing off like that. Roderick's eyes shot wide open in shock. He wasn't expecting to fall asleep. The hero was just mulling things over, and before he knew it, he fell asleep right in front of everyone. For some reason, he suddenly felt like he could sleep like a baby. The main character tensed the moment His Majesty said he was approaching and began to lean in. He tossed his leg onto the bed and asked if he could lie down beside her. Deborah immediately started shooing the clueless men out of the room. The maid wished them a good time and left the room, leaving Haley alone with the king. The girl wanted to tell the king to go back to his room, but it looked more like a haunted house. Roderick promised not to do anything and explained he just wanted to get a good night's sleep. The heroine wanted to offer her pillow, but the king refused. The girl's face turned bright red. She lay down and, in a sour tone, reminded the king he'd decided to support her genuine love. And now, he was getting into bed. Roderick laughed and called it cute because he didn't think she'd say something like that to her husband. She apologized and admitted she didn't know why she took the chance. Honestly, Haley was dead tired, so she was sure she could fall asleep in no time. Out of nowhere, the king decided to apologize for the first night. The heroine froze when she saw the intense look in his eyes. She wondered when this had started, but what he just said sure sounded like an apology. Roderick figured the pajamas were torn unintentionally last time, even though he couldn't believe it. If he gets aggressive again, the king told the heroine not to put up with it and to call Jade or the others. Right now, Roderick's talking about the pajamas Haley ripped up to use as a charm. The main character repeated that he didn't do it back then. Looks like the king's still stressing over it. Roderick chuckled low and suggested they get some sleep. But Haley knew he didn't buy her story. Still, she couldn't spill the real truth. The whole deal with evil spirits messing with her head and the damage she caused others was just too heavy to shake. She still didn't get why she kept butting in, even with her own mess of problems. Big guy, tough guy, still not broken. Our heroes hit the hay, and by then the servants had already redone all the castle chores. When the main character woke up, she couldn't breathe, felt all tight and stuffy. She cracked her eyes open to check what was up. Turns out she'd been sleeping, locked in His Majesty's iron grip the whole time. A silent scream of horror ripped out of her. Now she was done trusting guys for good. To this guy, the main character's just a body pillow and a sleeping pill. Haley's face lit up like a tomato in an instant. The girl tried to focus on the fact that he was sick and super lonely, not taking it personally. The heroine was already thinking about counting sheep to fall asleep. But the guy leaned in, and something weird brushed against her body, making her panic even more. Haley kept counting sheep, but in her head, they were already making out. The heroine needed to ditch her virgin ghost destiny and enjoy the afterlife. The king suddenly pulled her in even closer. Haley had no idea why he kept touching her. She tried to push him back a bit to stop feeling so awkward. But the guy kept sleeping. Suddenly, he shot his hand straight up. His face got closer to her neck, and she froze. Now she could feel the king's hot, steady breath. Her heart was racing even faster. Suddenly, Haley felt the king's lips on her neck. She tried to gasp for air, but it was barely working. In the end, the heroine started punching him in the back, demanding he get off her right now. Because of that, Roderick finally snapped out of it. The girl under him mumbled in confusion. "This position is seriously weird." Roderick immediately pulled away. The heroine finally caught her breath as her heart kept pounding. The man couldn't believe he'd messed up like this again. Haley flinched when the king yanked the blanket up. He let out a relieved breath. Her clothes weren't torn, so he hadn't done anything. Roderick instantly apologized. He touched her shoulder and apologized again. The man asked softly, "How scared were you?" The heroine turned to the king, and now he saw her pouting, hurt face. He leaped to his feet and told her, "Just rest, okay?" But he couldn't just walk out, so he pleaded with Haley to answer. She stayed silent, so he asked, "Are you really just gonna ignore me?" That was a little childish. The real issue wasn't that Haley was scared. It was just that she was super shocked. It was sweltering hot. Her heart was hammering, and every spot the king touched felt tingly and ticklish. Now that he was being all warm and gentle, the girl wanted to act like a kid. She'd never had this before. Roderick said sorry again and gave her a gentle head rub. The man walked out, but the heroine's heart was still racing like crazy. She had no clue what this feeling was, but she knew for sure she wouldn't sleep. The king just couldn't stop nervously tapping his foot on the floor. Over 10 days had passed since the king last visited the queen's chambers. Steward Jimmy was dying to know what went down. But First Squad Commander didn't have a clue. Roderick's been holding off on going back there. The Queen might feel awkward, but he was starting to wonder if she'd overdone it with that whole intense look. They're still a couple, and Roderick's got a question. What the heck is next? Though that marriage was definitely not the Queen's idea, it made Roderick even grumpier. Steward Jimmy sets a jewelry box in front of the king. It's a gift from the Diamond region, he explains. Roderick checks with Jade. Did he see the Queen's bracelet? Jade nods, confirming it. The king thinks this decoration is absolutely terrible, like the past is trying to outdo modern style. The man's mind flashed to his wife, who told him she made this bracelet herself. Roderick's face broke into a faint smile as he called Haley that weird girl again. Jade figured the king's just being spiteful towards an opponent he's personally invested in. The first squad captain realized something definitely went down between the queen and the king. The heroine headed off to dig into the royal family tree. The librarian said only royal family members can see those records, so he'd fetch something else instead. Haley reminded him she was the queen, his wife, so she was family. The man quickly explained it was just a copy, and that there were better documents for Her Majesty to read. The librarian dropped to his knees. Sure, he'd just committed a mortal sin. The heroine decided to take a look anyway, promising to handle it with care. As soon as Haley got back to her room, she asked the spirit to read the contents out loud. But the kid refused, telling her to take a book she could read herself. He pointed to her diary and said she hadn't even read that yet. Since living here based on Haley's half-finished memories wasn't cutting it, the heroine decided to read her diary. Real Haley was going on and on about the most ridiculous details of her life. In the end, the kid agreed to read the book. The first King Arthur conquered the Daemon Empire with the Holy Sword, which ruled the continent with a cruel spell and founded the kingdom. To celebrate the centennial, the fourth king strengthened ties with Malene, Roselle, and Duncan for national unity. Now, the heroine realized that the Duncans were originally a different nation. All this time, Haley had been writing down every single word. She was stunned when the spirit only mentioned when King Rodrigo was born and when he took the throne. But she also found out her husband is currently 29 years old, a 4-year gap from her previous age, and an 8-year gap from real Haley, way more than she expected. That's probably why the king sometimes treats her like a child. She also discovered that the Kingdom of Caiane's hardships and King Roderick's struggles this year are happening at the same time. Plus, during this period, Queen Haley dies, and a soul from another world enters here. Suddenly, the spirit mentioned that King Roderick hasn't been coming here lately. He was happy because those terrifying things don't follow him. In reality, the main heroine was doing everything she could not to dwell on this. That day, she made him feel awkward, so he probably doesn't want to see her face. The protagonist's long since gotten used to people turning away from her. As soon as the queen stepped into the hallway, Deborah approached her, saying she could have just ordered the book returned. Haley said it was fine, and instantly recognized a familiar voice. King Roderick was sparring with the captain of the First Night Squad. She hadn't seen him in forever. For some reason, the protagonist's heart started racing again. The maid mentioned His Majesty, and Sir Jade had the same mentor, and often sparred back then. But Deborah hadn't seen this in ages. Roderick looked like a sleek, powerful beast now. Suddenly, the protagonist sensed His Majesty's energy clearing with every breath. Probably hanging out with close friends was slowly calming him. She silently told him to do this more often than hunting. Haley gave the king a sad look and told Deborah to keep moving. He clearly didn't want to see her. Roderick paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. He suddenly spun around. In a flash, the man caught up to the heroine and grabbed her hand. It was shocking because just a second ago, His Majesty was clear across the room. Panting hard, Roderick asked Haley Duncan why she was just walking away. The heroine hesitated, saying she was just heading to her room. Roderick frowned, asking why she kept talking like that, and told her to speak plainly. All this time, she thought he was avoiding her, so she wanted to keep her distance. The king's face darkened the moment Haley said he could get back to work, and she'd leave. Roderick ran a hand through his hair, muttering she was a true Duncan, making people sweat. But then he shot back that she wasn't the one talking out of turn. Suddenly, the king pulled out a bracelet and handed it to Haley. The heroine took the accessory hesitantly, eyes wide as she asked if he was actually giving this to her. Roderick scowled, saying the bracelet looked awkward on her wrist. Jade cut in, remarking the king was being his usual rude self. He normally ignores jewelry, but the second he saw the bracelet, he claimed it for Her Majesty and kept it. Roderick flushed instantly and told Jade to be quiet. The main heroine burst out laughing at the thought that someone like him had such a sweet side. The king couldn't tear his eyes away from the girl's smile. His sword clattered to the floor. Then he offered to go with the queen. The main heroine was caught off guard, but His Majesty explained they were heading where she was going. Jade shouted at His Majesty, "You're the one who dragged me here." Haley burst into another laugh, clearly enjoying the show between the king and Jade. Roderick's gaze instantly drifted to the queen, his cheeks flushing slightly. They say a sparring match between spouses is like cutting water with a knife. As the heroes walked down the corridor, the king asked the girl how she'd been doing, and she nodded. The king frowned. "Don't you usually ask your own question back?" Haley repeated his question. Roderick answered he was scared to come see her, worried about making her uncomfortable. The main heroine asked, bewildered, "Why?" The king replied, "I was hurt that day too, because you looked at me like I was nothing." Haley laughed. "I was just shocked, okay? I realized then His Majesty didn't hate me after all." Shifting his gaze to the queen, the man realized he'd been avoiding her for nothing. He stared at the gifted bracelet and asked, "Does it really not please her?" The heroine smiled, said everything pleased her, and thanked him for the wonderful gift. But her hobby is carving bracelets by hand. It takes a lot of effort. Roderick grabbed her wrist and mused. Her tastes are really weird and totally out of the ordinary for a girl. Haley asked him not to judge her preferences, and it clearly stung the king. Behind His Highness, a wicked spirit appeared, but the girl handled it effortlessly. Still, it's the best accessory. The king didn't know why, but for some reason, his shoulders felt lighter. Roderick decided to ask, can she really read the royal genealogy copy she just borrowed? It's written in a language Haley couldn't have studied. The Duncan family doesn't have the right to read it, but the girl said she'd just been curious and looked at it. So the king's being reported on every single step she takes, probably because she's the daughter of a political rival. But deep down, the librarian was really worried his comments about the royal family might have somehow offended Her Majesty. Roddy figured she was still adjusting to palace life. That's why he told her about a place in this castle called Arthur's Forest. They had just been talking about family trees, so Haley had no idea why Arthur's Forest suddenly came up. She got the feeling she'd heard of it before, but maybe it was just her memory. Roddy said it was a sacred forest passed down since the country was founded. Nobles and servants can't go in, only the royal family members themselves. So he offered to take her. The main character was shocked by the offer, but she agreed right away and took his hand. But Haley didn't expect to see something like this. She'd never seen a place so full of holy energy, almost dropping to her knees to pray. But Roddy probably didn't see that glow or feel anything. Until now, the main character thought the king was better off staying far away from the haunted castle. Thought the king instinctively wanted to leave, but she was completely wrong. The castle housing Arthur's Forest is the most powerful shield that kept King Cayenne safe from dark creatures. So the obvious question came up, when did everything go sideways? Eventually, the heroine would figure it out. Evil spirits tried everything to sneak in and reach His Majesty, to force him into making an irreversible mistake. But the forest shield never let them through. Now even the worst evil spirits can't set foot in this forest. For the first time since the wedding, the heroine saw His Majesty radiating pure energy. Roderick told the girl to stop and rest. He'd specially laid a cloth on the rock, so the queen wouldn't get too cold or dirty up her outfit. Haley was caught off guard by the kindness, and Roderick warned her not to come here without him. She asked if he never came here often, and didn't notice the refreshing air around it. Turns out, Roderick liked the place just as much as she did. Haley told him to visit this spot more regularly from now on, and reminded him to keep training, like he did with Jade just recently. That's the only way the king can win such a brutal battle. But now the girl is talking like the one who's about to vanish. So Roderick asked what she had in mind. Haley honestly replied she wouldn't try to die anymore. People die when their time comes, right? So she asked His Majesty to give back the little knife. The heroine swore she'd only use it to carve. A bracelet alone won't do it, so we need to make as many of these as possible. Roderick took a deep breath and promised to return it. But the girl's words still felt weird to the king, so he still asked if she was trying to kill herself. In other words, isn't that the same as not even trying to live? People die when their time comes, right? He hit the nail on the head. Haley really wants to live. She tried hard too, but no matter how people fight, you can't outsmart fate. A breeze blew, and the king realized something weird was going on. This girl's definitely Duncan. But sometimes Roderick feels like she's living in a whole different world. You gotta meditate every morning to clear your energy. So the main character made it a habit. Today, Haley decided to kick off her day with meditation first. The little spirit asked, "You gonna crack that book open today too?" Haley gave a quick nod. She pulled out the book on the kingdom of Cayenne. No one knows a thing about young Arthur. the founding king and holy sword-bearer's childhood. He rose with the holy sword, crushed the empire with divine power, and as the Damon Empire crumbled, families started splitting up. The Mellon, Russell, and Duncan families later joined the new Kayan kingdom. King Roderick was told the movement to restore the Damon Empire had been completely crushed. They keep telling him that, but the rebel forces have been holding out for days. Don't get cocky. Stamp it out before it gains traction. The king clutched his head, and everyone started thinking, here comes another mad episode. A council member raised his hand. Are the border troops not enough? He asked. Duke Duncan asked to reinstate his eldest son, Albert, as commander of the Western Border Patrol. They demoted him 3 years ago out of nowhere. The Kayan Kingdom is pushing for a southward expansion strategy, so it's not exactly a demotion. The late king gave Arthur Duncan an honorary title, even though it was basically a worthless trinket for the Duke's son. The tension between the king and Duke Duncan's main anti-royalist faction was heating up. Albert slammed his palm on the table and shouted that such a statement could be seen as an insult from the royal family. But Roderick just told the Duke to worry about his own life. He's not planning to go easy on him just because he's the Queen's father. Then the king left the meeting hall. Duke Duncan, however, started shaking with anger. The main character was surprised when she was told His Majesty had arrived and stopped carving another artifact. Roderick stormed into the room, muttering that her father was clearly going crazy. Lately, every time something happens, the king comes to see Her Majesty. Haley couldn't hold back her laugh. She was curious to know what her father had done this time that caused such a reaction from His Majesty. Roderick sat next to the Queen and explained that the Duke had asked to reinstate her brother's position. What a great wife's family he ended up with. But the main heroine didn't remember any of this, so she decided to check Haley's diary later. My heart clenches just thinking about the diary. Out of the blue, His Majesty asked the girl if his words were offensive to her. Jade mentally scoffed. Is insulting parents and siblings not a sign you're ready to fight? To everyone's surprise, she said, I don't care. The king obviously knows Duncan's family isn't all sunshine and roses. Roderick remembered how coldly the Duke had treated his only daughter that day. So Haley's words made sense now. This girl was mocked as a pretty airhead, so Jade never got why the king questioned her reputation. But in the past few days, the hero started getting it. The Queen's not dumb. Whatever His Majesty throws at her, she takes it in stride. Roderick grumbled at Haley. You need to look the person you're talking to in the eye. But she explained, if I get hurt, you'll take the knife back. Roderick laughed and promised, I won't take it back. I'm not that cruel. The main heroine asked him to remember these words. They meant everything to her. His Majesty asked for an explanation so he could fully understand what it actually was. It's not as weird as everyone else thought at first, but it's not even something you could call an aesthetic decoration. Right now, the heroine carved an item that looks almost exactly like the one His Majesty's holding right now. Actually, the carving helps Haley keep her mind in check. But the king pointed out that this kind of hobby doesn't fit someone her age. The heroine turned her head and shot back that he didn't exactly look his age either. To Haley, and honestly, the narrator too, he looked way too young to be 8 years older than his wife. She didn't know Roderick secretly felt bad for her. The heroine laughed at his reaction. Roderick gently tugged her cheek and pouted like a kid, asking how she could laugh at the king. Then the heroine handed him the carved amulet, saying it was his now. Roderick honestly said he wanted to politely refuse, but Haley had poured her heart into the gift. But if he really didn't want it, she'd take it back. But Roderick immediately demanded it back, saying he was just joking. The main heroine asked me to put this thing under the bed. Even though this talisman looks weird, it does a decent job keeping bad luck and nightmares away. Haley specifically made it so the king could get some good rest. With her talent, the heroine can't craft a super cool amulet, but right now, King Roderick just needs a little help. She promised there'd be times when other people's sincere prayers could protect His Majesty. Roderick instantly blushed. The thing was, Haley knew it wouldn't be easy for them to accept. This whole situation messes with people's lives. It even used to really bum out the main heroine before. The king messed up his hair and told the girl to cut it out already. She can't help but say it. After all, the hero just takes the gift, no matter how hard he tries to refuse. The main heroine raised a hand and said to hold on. Haley quickly pulled out another amulet and told the king to grab this one too. Since it's her hobby, the heroine could whip up a bunch more like this. One of the amulets would definitely feel left out, so the main heroine grinned and asked the king to take both. Roderick's mind instantly filled with dirty thoughts. He snatched the gifts from Haley's hands and announced he was leaving, telling her not to follow. The door slammed shut right after. The main character found a new item to craft the next amulet, surprising Jade. That girl was seriously weird. That night, the king slept with her gifts sitting on the nightstand next to him. He managed to get some sleep, even if it was a lousy one. Roderick wondered, could those queen's gifts actually have some kind of effect? But that's impossible. But even without that, Haley was still a total weirdo. To the king's surprise, this morning wasn't so bad after all. Roderick finally left the room and got away from the amulets. Those nighttime evil spirits had been messing with their aura. As morning hit, the main character went back to meditating. The little spirit asked how much longer they'd keep this up, and Haley replied, she was all messed up today. Turns out, it was all because of Haley's diary she read at sunrise. Usually it was so dumb it gave me a headache, but today, different story. In one of the entries, real Haley was all set to talk to Lawrence about bailing on everything and leaving Cayenne with him. The girl in the diary kept thinking she was actually a total fool, just like everyone around her said. The main character's heart starts aching every time she thinks about Haley's crush. Haley probably had it real bad for Lawrence. Even after Haley's soul died, her heart stayed in her body like burnt-out ruins, ashes and all. The main character started wondering how Lawrence was doing these days. Out of nowhere, the girl heard some noise down the hallway. She asked the spirit if he could hear what they were talking about, and he said yeah. The kid said Roderick's losing it again, worse than usual today. This hasn't happened in a while, so Haley even started thinking the charms she gave weren't doing squat. Turns out, she's not going to fix this on her own. The main character had seen shamans before, who wrecked their own lives, trying to do what they couldn't handle out of pity. Smarter to look the other way and stay out of it, for now. Out of the blue, the main character's head started mixing images of the king and Lawrence. Real Haley definitely didn't want to forget Lawrence, and the main character felt the same way about not turning their back on him. Knights tried their hardest to hold back the raging king, but the evil spirits kept whispering he belonged to them, so he had to kill someone. Finally, His Majesty calmed down a bit. The Queen of the First Division rushed to the king, excitedly asking how he was doing. No point in stopping Her Majesty, so Jade answered she wasn't as crazy as before. But now, the Queen shouldn't get too close to him. But Haley knew she'd be fine, because Roderick was just trying to overcome a strong wave of madness. She shouted to the king she came today to offer him tea. This time, the tea will definitely be better. The king's condition is bad, and if we use the bracelet normally, it'll just break. But there's nothing we can do about it. Jade was ready to take control if things got dangerous. He couldn't figure out why the queen always stepped in during such dangerous moments, completely fearless of her husband. Haley's body trembled because she was still scared of the evil spirits. But only the human heart is shaking. She can keep going as long as she sticks to her goals. Those who follow the natural order will thrive, but those who fight against it will eventually die. Finally, the king's gaze cleared up, but his strength was rapidly leaving his body. Now the knights could let him go easily. The main heroine caught her husband before he collapsed on the floor. Haley was stunned when Roderick even managed to mutter something. He said he'd finally gotten a decent night's sleep today. The ugly little sticks Haley gave him definitely worked. Roderick pleaded with the queen not to look at him like that right now. Then, his strength vanished completely, and he collapsed, dragging the main heroine down with him. The knights helped carry the king to the reception room. The steward was in shock, because this time, His Majesty instantly fell asleep the moment the queen arrived. Roderick slowly opened his eyes. At that moment, Haley gently massaged the man's hand. The king suddenly told the girl not to get near him when he's like this, because he couldn't guarantee her safety. But those words weren't strong enough for a warning. The girl wasn't about to hand out those same statuettes to everyone, and knew he had his own take on it. Haley reminded him she was a Duncan, and she knew how to handle herself better than anyone. She told him to treat her like any other Duncan. She wanted to keep things at a comfortable distance, so they didn't get any more intense than they already were. Even though the king had asked this before, he brought it up again, asking if she was the one doing it. The girl replied that after a tough training session, it's nice to unwind. And he looked really wiped out. She always did it that way, some white lies, some omissions, keeping things a little ambiguous. For some reason, the butler got the feeling Her Majesty was hounding the king harder than usual. Haley asked Jade how long the king had been like this, and the commander said he'd been feeling under the weather since morning. But that wasn't what the girl was curious about at all. She just wanted to know how long he'd been acting like such a jerk. Jade said it started after Roderick took the throne. Headaches ever since. But lately it's gotten worse. The main character couldn't figure out how His Majesty could put up with all this for 3 years. That's gotta be really tough. The king's passed out again. From the way he was clinging to that amulet's energy, he's pushed himself to the limit. The main character asked Jade to spar with His Majesty more often, just like last time. But the captain hesitated, saying the king tends to go berserk whenever he picks up a weapon. Even if Jade's telling the truth, Haley can't say for sure that banning weapons is a great idea. She found that out after hugging the king a few times. His natural-born leader vibe makes it impossible to resist. Roderick's got that sacred emperor energy, purely deadly stuff. If he didn't try to rein in every single outburst, the main character definitely wouldn't have been able to hold him back. Jade was surprised when the queen asked him to take her husband out to Arthur's forest more often for some fresh air. The commander reminded them that the place is off-limits to everyone except the royal family. With her original memories blending into Haley's, the girl's mind's a total mess right now. She'd totally forgotten about that. In the end, the main character went back to her room and slept straight through the day. She flopped straight into bed yesterday. Today, even meditating felt like a drag. The bracelet's still intact, but the recent events gave it a bit of a beating. Haley figured His Majesty would give her some space for a while, so she took her time today. But the opposite happened. The second the king walked in, Haley assumed her dad was spouting nonsense again. Roderick grumbled, "Do I need a reason to visit my wife's room? Guess he just stopped by, like a regular patient at the clinic." The heroine smiled and reminded him he once didn't even want gifts from his loving wife. As a Duncan family member, Haley never missed a chance to be sarcastic. Since Roderick was here, he offered the queen tea they hadn't gotten to drink yesterday. As the girl sipped her tea, the king looked deep in thought. To her surprise, he asked her to come over and do the same thing she'd done in the office lately. The heroine tried her best with her limited skills, and Roderick took it as a cat's playful pounce. He told the queen he'd gotten no sleep again tonight. Her prayers clearly didn't reach Roderick yesterday, probably because she was thinking of someone else. But Haley still didn't get why he was asking. Even though it always sounds absurd to her, Roderick noticed she was wary, but didn't know why. She's probably hiding something, but it doesn't look like Haley wants to hurt him or the royal family. A smile tugged at his lips, and Roderick asked the queen why she suddenly pretended not to understand. The guy was too persistent, so the heroine decided to play along and sat next to him. Then she took his hand and started massaging it. As Roderick suspected, for someone who trained a lot, she didn't have that many muscles, and her fingertips were soft. Her skin was thin, so blisters from carving showed up in some spots and healed, contradicting the queen's words about her hobby. Roderick doubted she did anything like that before coming to the palace, so the man didn't get why she was lying. The king wanted to address it, but the moment he looked at the girl, his expression shifted. Haley was stunned when His Majesty asked if she was trying to seduce him. He turned away and told the heroine her front was coming untied. The main character's face instantly flushed bright red. She had no clue how this even happened. She jumped when the king asked her to take her hands off. Roderick handled it smoothly. The king caught her face, all flushed from shame and embarrassment. "You can't hide that from anyone else's eyes." The main character snapped, "That was totally inappropriate. You should have just acted like you didn't see anything." But Roderick didn't want anyone else gawking at it either. The king said to chalk it up to his own screw-up. Haley's face went all flustered again, and the king immediately apologized. She didn't like it, but he begged her not to hate him that hard, because right now, he feels better than he did before. The main character mumbled, "I feel way better than I did at first, too. That girl's got a real knack for playing with people's feelings." Haley vowed to herself she'd stop doing things that scream for attention, but she's got a habit of repeating her mistakes. The next day, Jade showed up at the king's office. Roderick asked in a calm tone if anything had happened, and the man explained about the report he'd prepared. The commander of the first squad pointed out that the king's condition was slowly starting to improve. The first woman who became the king's bride died from being poisoned. Before the second bride was poisoned, Roderick hadn't realized Duke Duncan was so fixated on marrying into the royal family. Jade told the ruler that Haley had a diary she brought with her from the duchy. It had around 10 chapters, and after arriving at the palace, she hasn't written anything new, just opens it occasionally to read. The commander asked if he should look through the contents. For some reason, Roderick just didn't feel like it, so he decided to let the queen have that at least. The king didn't want to be the kind of guy who reads through his wife's old diary. Then Roderick suggested wrapping up the Duncan talk and going to stretch his legs. The spirit asked the girl why she was pretending not to see him again. He showed up again right when Haley finally decided to take a break. The heroine pleaded with the spirit to just stop talking to her, because she just wants to live a normal life. But for someone who talks like that, Haley's got a knack for getting herself into trouble. This ghost hits the nail on the head. For the umpteenth time, the first squad commander's sword was taken by the king you couldn't get near. Roderick grumbled at Jade, asking how he could be weaker than his ruler, and the commander vowed to step up his game. The king was about to start another round when, out of nowhere, an indescribable feeling hit him. He tossed the sword aside and bolted, thinking she was there for some reason. Haley's image popped into his head instantly. But if he went that way, it'd be the garden by the lake. They say Haley Duncan tried to drown herself in the river, which is why Roderick got a bad vibe. Since this guardian spirit didn't seem to help Roderick, the main heroine asked why not. The ghost knelt and asked the girl if he should tell her about Roderick's sin. But of course, the spirit was just messing with her. He couldn't actually tell her. Because it's a natural mystery the heroine needs to figure out herself. Haley slumped, but her eyes lit up the moment the ghost used her past life name. She hadn't mentioned her name at all, so she wondered how far the ghost could see. Since Connie Che and the real Haley have both died once already, the main character doesn't need to be so scared. He's talking like it doesn't matter. The ghost pointed at King Roderick, letting the main character know her husband was coming. He had a troubled look on his face and once again brought a big army of evil spirits. Haley looked confused at the spirit when he suddenly stood up. He told the queen he'd handle the current king himself so she could have a good time. This ghost was clearly strong. He wiped out all the evil creatures in an instant. Roderick rushed over to Haley, excitedly asking why she was here. He's probably worried because she's near the water right now. With a warm smile, Haley replied she'd just gone out for some fresh air and hadn't even thought about jumping into the lake. But Roderick gave her a suspicious look. Out of nowhere, he sat down next to her. He spotted a drawing on the ground and asked Haley if she'd just been messing around doodling. He struck a cute expression, making the girl's face light up with a smile. Then, Haley offered His Majesty a walk in the forest, if he'd finished his training there. Right now's the perfect time for a stroll. Haley was pushing his buttons more than he could handle. The main character got a chill when the king casually mentioned she was different from what he'd heard. She realized she needed to act more like Haley Duncan to avoid suspicion. But being near him was so much fun right now. Roderick noticed her mood shifting, so he asked why she was falling silent again. If she's got something to say, she should keep going. Instead of answering, she told the king he should get regular checkups to stay healthy. Roderick grinned, stood up, and offered her his hand for a walk in Arthur's forest. Being with the king was a blast, but if she got too deep, it could get dangerous. If she kept her distance, everything would be fine. She said no, but the king threatened to carry her. In the end, the main character agreed to go, but only on her own terms. Arthur's forest was always buzzing with sacred energy. If this guy kept coming here, his aura would get stronger. No matter how hard Haley tried, she probably couldn't even clear half of his energy. She was caught off guard the moment the king suddenly flopped onto her lap. After a few sessions, he realized he slept great this way, totally clueless about the real reasons. Haley grumbled at the king. "You actually think of me as your personal pillow?" Roderick smirked and offered the queen, "How about you be my blanket instead of a pillow?" He knows full well this marriage isn't exactly a happy event for Haley, but Roderick wanted their marriage to at least have moments like this. Even though their relationship was far from normal, full of all sorts of arguments and conflicts, the king still felt right at home. The idyll shattered when Roderick dropped the bomb that the annual hunting competition was happening next month. Last year they barely managed to cancel it, but this year it's a must-do. Unlike his wife, who adores animals, his in-laws so nuts he won't let it get canceled. Seeing Haley's reaction, he knew for sure she was all about animals. Haley decided to ask, why was the hunt canceled last year if the king usually went there all the time? Turns out the hunting event is basically a social mixer. Since it's not just the king's people showing up, there's a ton of outside eyes around. Haley got it instantly. He didn't want to be seen like that in front of people. The king immediately wondered if this girl had somehow sensed his anxieties just by hearing his story. But she was the type to always hide things, so how could she possibly care about him that much? Roderick had never admitted his own madness to himself, terrified of becoming a full-blown mad king. Yet something about this made him think telling everything might actually calm him down, specifically to her, the daughter of his political enemy, who'd run straight to her father and spill his secrets the second he showed weakness. Even knowing all the risks, Roderick wanted to confess everything, and only to her. But the heroine clapped a hand over his mouth. She answered in a sad voice, "It really isn't. He's not crazy or broken." The heroine was absolutely sure. Someone with those clear, open eyes just couldn't be. A few days later, another meeting happened, and the hunting contest came up again. Duke Duncan decided to ask the king if he felt unwell, like the most loyal hound. Roderick still couldn't wrap his head around how such a rotten guy could have a daughter as perfect as hers. He never got why he had to see this scumbag's face in his own wife. Roderick raised his hand, asking Jade to hand over that document. He had one of his own to deliver to his father-in-law. It turned out to be an anonymous complaint about a mismatch between the Duke's actual income from his lands and the taxes he'd paid. Now the royal family could launch an investigation to dig deeper into it. Roderick asked for the chance to respond to those words again. He wanted Duke Duncan to stop tarnishing the Queen's reputation himself. The king was giving his father-in-law just one chance to clean up his act before the official audit. Roderick also added that the hunting competitions would go on as planned next month. He left, and Duke Duncan struggled to contain his fury at the setback. Late at night, the heroine sat in her room, carving another amulet for His Majesty with a knife. As soon as she finished, Roderick, who'd been lying on her bed the whole time, offered to let her lie down next to him. After Arthur's last trip to the forest, the king dozes off in Haley's room whenever he gets the chance. Plus, it's the cleanest room in the castle. Roderick didn't wait for a reply. He got up from the bed and walked over to the heroine. She froze when he effortlessly picked her up by the arms. Then he sat her on the bed and said she should sleep on the couch if she found it uncomfortable being with him. But someone who just found a decent spot might feel a bit awkward making someone else sleep there. So the girl let him sleep in the bed. The king acted like he'd been waiting for this, so he immediately climbed in beside her. He admitted he was genuinely glad his wife wasn't heartless enough to make him sleep on the couch. Suddenly, Roderick loomed over her and asked Haley if she knew what she'd have to do once they started sharing a bed. With a sly grin, he suggested they do it right then. Haley blushed furiously, her heart hammering wildly. Roderick noticed she'd frozen, unable to move or speak. So he lay down again, muttering it was just his usual joke, and she didn't need to struggle to say no. Truth was, Haley wanted to do it too, but for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to say it. Even though when it came to ghosts, she was the real expert. Roderick knew she needed to mentally prepare. After all, there was someone she loved so much she'd dive into water. And if you think about it, he's in the competition. Sir Lawrence. The next day, the king read a report about his wife's lover, a name he'd heard before. It's all because Lawrence is a knight with a well-known name in the kingdom. Before marrying Haley, the king never gave him a second thought. The table also had a report from the pre-marriage investigation on Haley, so Roderick decided to read it again. When the king reviewed the queen's report once more, he realized it didn't add up from start to finish. That's when he started lashing out at Jade for doing his job so carelessly. The king ordered everything to be checked from scratch, and a new report ready by the time the competition ends. Roderick couldn't understand why it bugged him so much, but he figured it had to do with his doubts about Haley. Right now, the girl's wandering near the lake alone, so the king gave Jade strict orders to watch the queen. A few days later, the main heroine was ready to pull off a big move. The spirit behind her suddenly asked what she was staring at, which startled her. Turns out she was actually looking for him. She wanted him to keep an eye on the king during the competition and help if anything came up. But the ghost couldn't make that request. It's just ridiculous for a person to ask a spirit to strike a deal. If this castle were crawling with monsters, they'd have torn into the heroine by now and ruined her life. Haley was on board, but she knew her strength wasn't enough to pull it off. She tried stitching a handkerchief instead of an amulet, but it didn't work. Spirits still came through. No way around it. Her power was too weak. She'd have to make multiple amulets. She poured every ounce of her soul and every wish she had into them. The heroine stayed up nights, prayed nonstop, anything to give the amulets even a hint of power. Just as he was leaving, the spirit told her to enjoy life and seize the moment. But it wouldn't help. The hunting contest was hours away, so she had to keep making those handkerchiefs. As soon as she stood up, her head started spinning. She'd burned through every ounce of energy she had in the last few days. Now, she was completely drained. The catch? The heroine had told Deboru not to follow her. That meant she was alone here now. Her strength finally left her. She passed out. The king shot back. "That's practically a protest against me." The heroine tried again to explain. "You didn't mean it like that." Jade found her unconscious and carried her into this room. Roderick asked, clearly annoyed, how many times this had already happened since she ended up in the palace. Haley laughed, even though the answer was just to count how many times the king had gone insane. He started messing with her hair, asking, "Can't you just say you're hurting?" He knew damn well this marriage was pure hell to her. But Haley immediately shot back. That wasn't true at all. She'd just decided to accept her fate and roll with it. But the king didn't buy it, so he asked Haley to say his name. Haley fidgeted, but still answered, "It's Roderick Ferris Blake." She knows all this and somehow never called him by name. Haley's eyes went wide the second the king gave her permission to use Rod or Roderick. She thanked him for the honor, but turned it down, saying she'd keep calling him by his title. Roderick didn't get what was going on, so the girl, hiding under the blanket, explained they needed more distance. He immediately asked if it was some Duncan family move to provoke someone with a single word, and Haley burst into laughter. That girl definitely had the king's attention. Every time she tried to keep distance, the king got irritated. But the second she laughed, his mood instantly bounced back. Once she calmed down, Haley decided to ask His Majesty if he was really going to the hunting contest. He was a little surprised the girl was still upset about it, probably because of her love for animals. Roderick was completely unprepared for the queen to offer breaking at least one arm to cancel everything, or at least a leg, which made the man burst out laughing. With wrists that thin, Haley can't even break a finger. The heroine realized, after all, there's no other way but handkerchiefs. Hearing that, the king immediately asked if she was really going to give him a handkerchief at the upcoming hunting contest. Haley asked in surprise if he really thought she was lying, but she didn't get why the king wanted a handkerchief from her. It's completely useless. Roderick tousled her hair again, saying she was just trying to say she didn't want to give the handkerchief. He told the girl that conversation hurt him emotionally. The heroine promised to give the handkerchief, so His Majesty shouldn't doubt her. Roderick mentally asked if he should doubt she'd give the handkerchief, or if she was hiding something. Haley jumped up from the bed and exclaimed it wasn't a lie. She pointed to the pile of handkerchiefs. Roderick actually thought she was just careful with her feelings, but it seemed she decided to hand them out to someone else. The guy figured the queen's health was tanking because she was making these bandanas nonstop. Check her hands. If you look, they're all scraped up. When she keeps space, it gets under his skin. But when she laughs, Roderick's heart warms up again. He's not cool with her risking her health over regular old bandanas, but it's a nice touch she's trying to keep her promise. He hovers over her again, telling her to take a break. She's completely white-faced. He offers up his hand as a pillow, dead serious. Haley's never been in a situation like this, so she's not sure if it's a go. Roderick tells her to scooch closer. Her laying on his wrist was cutting off the blood flow. Even though it was super awkward, she still moved in closer. The king's totally confused. Sometimes she looks like she's holding a world of loneliness and sadness. Could be her old man, Duncan, used a heavy hand back when she was growing up. He couldn't wrap his head around how someone could lay into such a little thing. Haley goes stiff the second he drops the bomb that they've got a problem. Roderick's just not getting it. Why's she always staring at that lake like she wants to jump in? Haley's flustered, asking why he's so fixated on it. The king clamped her in close and reminded her she was his wife, who shouldn't be asking such obvious questions. Even if someday Haley had to pay a huge price for this warmth, she still wouldn't stop. So the problem was the king, who stole the heroine's chance to play dumb. Haley clearly wasn't going to answer, so the man told her to hurry up and get some sleep. She was glad he was done with the questions. Time flew by, and the hunting contest day arrived. The servant dressed up Her Majesty and said the king would definitely win once he saw her in that getup. But in reality, Haley wanted him to come in last and not kill anyone. She grabbed 3 of the best handkerchiefs she was planning to give to His Majesty. Roderick assumed Haley was all set with her prep work. Amid the crowd of contestants, the king quickly spotted Lawrence. Haley's love interest kept casting glances around, like he was looking for someone. Then the king noticed Haley. Roderick smiled and figured living in this world had to be tough on her. Being so tiny, the main character handed him the 3 handkerchiefs and explained it was best to keep them on hand during the contest. The king took the gift, and Haley thought it was adorable how he fumbled with their big hands, blushing as he did. Roderick asked the girl what he should catch for her. Haley started to protest, but the king cut in. No fool goes hunting and comes back empty-handed. Lawrence spotted Haley and hurried over. The king figured his wife didn't want him to win. The competition's basically a contest. Haley wanted to tell her husband to tone it down and not take things so personally, but she kept her mouth shut, because Roderick's on the throne now. So all Haley could manage was a warning, not to get hurt and to come back safe. The king heard a commotion behind him and spun around. He spotted Lawrence pushing through the crowd toward them. The moment Haley saw her true love, tears just welled up. Memories flooded her mind. She started pleading with it to stop. The queen's crying over her ex. Bad look for King Roderick. The man leaped off his horse right away. Then he instantly hugged Haley, asking worriedly if she was all right. The tears just wouldn't stop, so the heroine started apologizing to the king for her mistake. But Roderick didn't get why she was crying and acting guilty, like she'd done something unforgivable. Haley smiled when the man praised her for being quick and clever, hiding fast enough to keep most people from seeing her tears. The crowd started thinking the queen had been weeping because she'd missed the king for a few days. Roderick had Haley lift her head, pretending nothing had happened. He suggested diverting the crowd's attention to something bigger to bury the whole mess. The king's lips slowly crept toward the girls. It was all Roderick and Duke Duncan's fault, and the king was about to admit it. He asked with a grin if she could expect their help, knowing full well it was just a cover. The heroine shut her eyes. At that moment, their lips touched in a gentle kiss. The whole thing lasted just a few seconds. When Roderick finally pulled back with a grumble, he confessed it was just an excuse to begin with, just because he felt like it. His work here is done, so the king told the girl to head back and stay safe. All this time, Lawrence was watching our heroes. Even though His Majesty said everything was fine, it was really to cover for her. The main heroine was grateful, so she decided to catch up with him. As soon as Roderick stopped, the girl handed him her bracelet. The man smiled and asked if she was really giving him something she treasures so much, leaving herself with nothing. However, Haley told His Majesty to return the jewelry as soon as he comes back. Now, there was nothing else she could do. Roderick chuckled quietly and thanked his wife for lending him something so precious to her. His gaze fell again on Haley's beautiful lips. A strong urge rose in him to kiss her again, but he managed to suppress it and headed to his knights. Watching him leave, the main heroine began praying to the gods for his safe return. As night fell, they decided to make camp. Roderick, glaring at Lawrence, asked Jade annoyed if he should just shoot the guy. Duke Duncan probably planned to make his daughter queen from the moment she was born, so she never could have dreamed of another man. The report said Lawrence was the one who broke up with Haley, and for some reason, that really pisses off the current king. Jade figured it happened because he felt the weight when the national marriage rumors started spreading. They couldn't keep the secret relationship going, so Lawrence decided to call it quits at the right moment. The king remembered Haley's expression. It looked like it wasn't over yet. Roderick decided to ask Jade to go hunting for him. Now he's got to catch more game than Albert Duncan to keep the Duke from bringing up his son. And on top of that, Jade's got to catch more than Lawrence, Cayenne's best sword fighter. Glancing at the sky, the king wondered what she's up to right now. At dawn the next day, the heroine decided to give King Roderick a little respect. She whispered the right words in her mind. Everything went way smoother than last time, and the heroine was certain her grandma would be proud. Since meditation's over, next up is ditching this slip of paper. It's got a 5-item to-do list that's been driving her nuts. Day 5 of the hunting competition was in full swing. Jade was pushing himself hard, while King Cayenne just lounged under a tree. But all this time, Roderick had been studying the queen's treasure closely and noticed the bracelet and scarf patterns looked almost identical. He turned around. The second one of the knights reported a squirrel had gotten trapped in their snare. Squirrel pelts are popular for trimming cloaks these days, so we might as well add this one to the catch. But this wasn't your average squirrel. Roderick couldn't tell if it was trying to call him over or warning him to stay back. Was it sad or just fine? Jade shot the king a glare the second he ordered him to build a cage for the squirrel. They decided to send the little guy straight to the queen. Roderick was already picturing Haley's smile and reminded himself again. Only 2 days left. From the diary, the heroine learned Lawrence had told real Haley not to run away, but to build new relationships. He promised to become the queen's knight so they could always be together. But the duke's daughter knew that wouldn't work. Now, if Haley's spirit still lingered here, the heroine wanted to calm it and help it find peace. So the 6th item on her list was to visit the hand where Haley jumped. As she read further into the journal, the girl learned her father was about to do something terrifying, and Haley wanted to stop it. But she didn't want another slap across the face. According to the journal, you can see signs of Haley's attempts to understand the Duke because she was a kind-hearted kid. Both heroines had rotten luck with their parents. From the last page of the journal, you can tell she stopped writing a month before her death. Recently, the main character clearly remembered Haley's childhood. If you think about it, she remembers a lot from childhood, but her memories of recent years are really fuzzy. The king praised his captain for crushing that idiot Duncan and the pompous turkey Lawrence. In the end, His Majesty never had a single fit. Suddenly, the hamster in the cage started squealing loudly. The king spun around, ordered all the soldiers to scatter, then hurled his sword. Turns out a venomous snake had been approaching all this time, but Roderick managed to save his subordinates. Her bite is so toxic it can kill even a horse. The king praised the kid for giving the warning. They're all set to head out again since Haley's already waiting. The men will arrive at the forest entrance soon. The ceremony's at night, so they're letting the horses rest. Roderick's eyes widened the moment he spotted a familiar figure right at the forest exit. His horse took off toward her instantly. The heroine greeted His Majesty with a big smile on her face. Roderick scooped Haley up in his arms and started spinning her joyfully as she congratulated him on his return. Haley was beyond happy he'd come back unharmed. Her efforts hadn't been in vain after all. Later, Roderick handed her the marmot. Haley didn't get why he brought a wild animal that was perfectly fine living in the wild. That little creature was doomed to die, but met a noble man who saved its life. The marmot hopped right over to the heroine instantly. He bit everyone, but was nice to Haley. Probably her aura calmed him down. Roderick returned her bracelet. Noticing Haley's happy smile, the king joked she was happier about the bracelet than him. Out of nowhere, the heroine spotted the serpent's evil spirit right in front of her. Haley froze instantly, struck by fear. With a trembling voice, she asked the king if he'd accidentally killed the snake during the competition. He nodded. Taking a deep breath, Haley replied that he shouldn't have killed her. Snakes hold a lot of grudges, and unlike other spirits, she remembers the person who killed her. But the bigger problem is that Haley is terrified of them. Haley covered her face so she wouldn't have to see the spirit, then pitifully asked the king why he couldn't have just walked. Though she knew logically it was unavoidable, she had to clench her willpower into a fist, but she couldn't force herself to face it. Cursing how much she hated it, she bolted from the king. Shocked, Roderick didn't even realize who the girl was referring to, him or the snake. The hunting contest ended, and as expected, Jade won, glorifying King Roderick. The squirrel Roderick brought settled on the shore of the castle's lake. It seemed like calm days had arrived, but Haley's anxieties only grew worse with each passing day. Haley couldn't leave her room, terrified of running into that gross thing. Because of it, she hadn't seen the king for 4 days. Unexpectedly, Jade knocked on the queen's door and asked for permission to enter. Haley froze the moment the room's door opened. Roderick's eyes snapped open. What the hell is he doing lying here? He was working in his office, damn it. He blinked at Haley, realization hitting like a ton of bricks. He was flat on her lap. Flashback 4 days to the second the hunting contest wrapped up. Roderick figured the queen hated him. Hell, emotional wounds like that never really fade. Jade shrugged off the gloom, pushing him to confront the princess directly. Honestly, Roderick had no clue what to do after seeing her cry over some guy. Like he'd already said, the whole mess was on him and Duke Duncan. They didn't force her, but days passed, and the king's mental state kept tanking. He hadn't slept a wink, and now he was at his breaking point. Roderick's hearing voices again, whispering to kill something. Jade had no idea why, but he could see the queen calmed the king. Still, the guy dug in his heels. Suddenly, Roxanne slammed his head on the table, screaming curses. Maybe the king was fighting this because of what was going on between the queen and Sir Lawrence. But Jade couldn't watch this anymore. And that's how the king wound up in the main heroine's room. Roderick caught himself thinking the air here feels way different, and those damn voices in his head finally shut up. He grumbled at her, reminding her he can't get a wink without her. The heroine admitted she wanted to see him too, and was a little nervous about it. Roderick, acting like a pouty kid, begged her to come see him at least once in a while. Roderick's room was number 1 on his to-do list, so the heroine had no choice but to sneak in. The king was shocked to feel his body actually lighten up. Yeah, most folks say mysterious magic's just a fairy tale, but the royal family's archives say otherwise. Roderick asked if she'd ever studied medicine, and Haley, with a warm smile, said she hadn't. Roderick told her that when he's with her, his head stops buzzing and gets clear. Even though the heroine wanted to spill everything, fear got the best of her. She didn't want people looking at her differently, so she told the king to go ahead and use her for whatever he needed. Roderick clung to her hand and suggested kissing her again. He wasn't ready for Haley to lean in and peck him on the cheek right then. The king jumped up, all flustered, and snapped, "Are you a fox or something?" He yanked her in tight and said, "Let's try that kiss again. I need to check something." The moment Haley started crying, Roderick was crazy with the urge to kiss her, so he needed to check a few things. The king couldn't resist. He pushed her onto the bed, and she gently wrapped her arms around him. Roderick deliberately interlaced his fingers so his hands wouldn't wander off on their own, no matter how hard he tried to stop them. This kiss was different. Something about it made the heroine sense desperation. Either way, it was way too obvious. As soon as they ran out of air, the king gently pulled away. He proved his theory right. This girl had become special to him. He hadn't realized his heart had grown so much. Out of the blue, the man decided to ask Haley how much she loved Lawrence. Just hearing the name weighed heavily on the heroine's heart. Real Haley still hurt from hearing it. "Seems like it," the girl replied to the king. Roderick decided not to rush. Let Haley sort it all out and forget Lawrence for good. Instead, he offered his hand as a pillow. The king made up this excuse so she'd snuggle closer and they could cuddle up together. Haley knew exactly what King Roderick was trying to do. Close the gap between them. But the closer he got, the worse things got for her. If he hated her, she wasn't sure she could handle it. But bringing it up was pointless. Roderick wasn't to blame. He was just being too nice. The king pulled her in tighter, knowing now she'd taken up permanent residence in his heart. They fell asleep like that. Sometime in the dead of night, the heroine jolted awake. Something felt off. She flinched the second she spotted the angry spirit outside the window. The protagonist leapt out of bed, ready to deal with it. It was a drunkard's ghost, begging for more liquor even after Haley politely told him to leave. So she snapped cold as ice, "Cut the crap!" She was ready to give one last warning, or just destroy him if he kept latching onto that guy. The spirit vanished. Haley collapsed to her knees, drained. To fix the real problem, she'd need enlightenment or destruction. Fighting ghosts was just too much. Still, Haley wanted to give that guy a peaceful night. Everyone deserved that. Time to take him on. So the main heroine sprinted to the painting and started yanking off all the stuck-on amulets below it. The little spirit immediately started ranting. If that barrier goes down, those evil ghosts are getting back in for sure. Can't just run away like this, so now Haley's determined to stand her ground. The second the defenses came off, a vicious snake spirit slithered out from behind the door, way bigger than the main heroine had expected. The little spirit instantly realized Haley couldn't take this thing on alone, so he jumped in to help. The main heroine was shocked when the kid lunged at the giant snake's head, but she instantly felt the ghost's power fading, so she didn't waste time. Haley quickly performed the cleansing ritual, demanding the creature forget this world's pain and go home. Thanks to her little friend's help, Haley pulled it off, but she vowed never to kill snakes again. She flopped onto the bed, offering the little spirit a nap. Morning of the next day hit, and the king finally woke up after a solid sleep. But he noticed Haley looked pale and asked if she'd had a bad dream. Huh! The girl had been sleeping on the other side last night, so Roderick figured he must have rolled her over in his sleep. I wish this was really just a dream. The guy immediately asked Haley if she really didn't enjoy kissing, but instead of answering, she begged him to never kill snakes again, if at all possible. After all, they've got Jade to handle any problem. For some reason, the first squad leader felt like he was being handed another annoying task. Roddy got her request, and the main heroine thanked him for listening. When the fourth king ruled, he left a letter for future rulers, warning them about the mysterious forces of the three houses. At the next meeting, Duke Duncan once again asked His Majesty to reinstate his son at the western border. Roddy chuckled quietly and asked if they were talking about the guy who couldn't even catch half the beasts in the contest. So Duke Duncan decided to tell the king he'd tried several times to discuss this with the queen and kept getting shot down. But Roddy warned Haley's dad not to go spreading rumors about the queen. He didn't force her to ban anything, so there's no need to complain publicly right now. As soon as the meeting ended, Roddy wondered how a father could not know his own daughter this well. Then his eyes landed on Haley. Unlike her relatives, this girl was way different from all the Duncans. The main character lit up when she saw the king heading straight down to her. Roderick wondered what the queen was carving up this time. The main character said it was those same things she gave him last time. He remembered those weird figurines he'd just gotten had already deteriorated badly, even though they were new. So he decided to get a better tree for Haley so she could play as long as she wanted. Roderick said he got stressed during the meeting and came down to blow off some steam. The main character immediately realized her dad had stirred up another mess somehow today. The king figured she didn't like the Duncan family and wondered why the Duke was so eager to meet her. Unexpectedly, Haley said she'd meet the Duke and do whatever His Majesty wanted. When asked why, she replied the king could use her for any purpose, which made him furious. Roderick coldly asked if he had been that cold to her that she'd use such words. Clearly, the word use didn't sit well with him. The girl's face fell the moment she realized the king had finally had enough of her. Seeing this, he let out a deep sigh. A thought hit him. When she stays quiet, it only makes things harder on him. The king called off this little spat, 'cause he regrets everything. Then he gently brushed his fingers over her, pulled her in close, and kissed her. Haley parted her lips just a touch, and the king's tongue instantly traced her bottom lip. Lately, it's become really important to him that he's not just pleasing her body, but her soul, too. So he asked with a pout, "You okay?" The heroine blushed. "I'm fine, and I liked it." Roderick apologized. He was the one who brought up the Duke first. But then he surprised her, asking his dear wife if she'd kiss him multiple times a day. If she likes it, she can do it at least once. Haley decided to pretend she didn't hear a word. In moments like this, she looks so innocent, even if the cold in her heart won't melt. The more Jade investigated this case, the more questions he had. Now he has no choice but to ask that man for cooperation. On the commander's orders, Lawrence arrived at his office to answer some questions about the Queen. Soon the king found out that Lawrence Irwin had also checked out the report on the Queen. The commander of the First Night Squad explained it was needed to follow the king's orders. Now the report reveals a lot of details, and after full checks, the investigation got bigger. But the content's not that different from before. Everyone around Haley, even her childhood friends she'd lost touch with, gave the same testimony about her. Even Sir Lawrence was confused by their doubts about the report. But Roderick was still upset that Haley's boyfriend got pulled into the case. From the report, he found out the girl orders a new outfit at least once a week and's always humming tunes. The king decided to ask Jade if he really believed their queen was involved. Right then, the main character was sitting by the lake. A spirit popped out of the water with a sly grin, asking if she was expecting him today. Haley silently pointed at the people standing behind her. Even though she asked to be left alone after she passed out last time, the king won't let it happen. The main character decided to ask the ghost if it was really not going to help, because she didn't think she could handle it alone and would probably just die first. The spirit suggested she quit doing whatever she was up to, but Haley refused. Then the spirit noted that her opinion of the king had definitely improved. She'd been handling things well so far, so maybe she could keep pushing herself harder. The main heroine was about to respond when the man vanished in a flash. Suddenly, Roderick popped up beside her, asking if she'd decided to show him her protest. If she wanted him to just fill this lake with dirt, she could keep showing up. But honestly, he was panicking because he thought she'd come back to the lake. But at least she seemed okay. It'd be awesome if he could just ask his damn questions outright. Then Haley would push him even further away, something the king absolutely didn't want. He sat down next to her and asked her to sing. Haley instantly refused, claiming she couldn't sing for the life of her. Roderick decided to take his next round of anger out on Jade for that idiotic report. Then he brushed her cheek and suggested a kiss. But this time, she had to make the first move. The heroine didn't fight it and leaned in first. Then she slowly pulled away. With a happy grin, the king invited her to dinner this evening, and the main heroine, of course, said yes. She struck out again with that nagging list of hers, but she decided to give it another shot and asked the king if she could check out his bedroom tonight. The man blushed like a beet the second those words left her lips. The king figured he'd better ask one question just to be safe. Catching the vibe, the heroine screamed that it wasn't at all what he was thinking. Roderick clued in and told Haley she didn't need to ask for permission every time. If the spirit wasn't on board, she had no choice but to start with the king's bedroom. As night fell, she trudged over, dragging her feet the whole way. The place was giving off seriously creepy vibes, and the heroine really didn't want to step inside. But turning back wasn't an option since she came armed with a bunch of amulets. Roderick could barely believe it. This goofy kid was actually searching his room. The hero scooped her up and teased, "You gonna come by more if I bring snacks?" Then Roderick pinned her to the bed, begging for at least a little attention from his wife. The heroine blushed again and scrambled to put space between them and the king. She spotted 2 amulets on the nightstand beside the bed, ones she'd given him long ago. Time had clearly taken its toll, turning them black. These little statues now stand as proof that the king's night was truly brutal. The heroine vowed to craft new ones soon. These could just be tossed, since they'd crumble any day now. Haley decided to ask His Majesty if he'd ever committed a grave sin in his life. This situation can't be explained without a sin that warrants such punishment. The man replied that among those who've ascended the throne, not many would deny it. The heroine admitted she wasn't exactly a saint either. Roderick laughed. They didn't make sense to him. Haley told him she'd once been furious at someone, and now she blamed him for all her troubles. Maybe that person had their own reasons, but the heroine refused to care. One day, she felt sympathy for others again, but the more she did, the lonelier it made her. She had no choice but to sort out her emotions inside. Bad karma wasn't worth the trouble. Snapping back to herself, she quickly apologized for rambling about boring stuff too long. Yet at that moment, Roderick felt like someone had slipped into his heart, only to vanish moments later. He picked up the figurines and suggested giving them both names. For a brief moment, the man caught a glimpse of the girl's true self, and it really pleased him. The heroine decided to name one of the amulets after Haley. She mentally gave the second one the name Yi Che. Now, even if the Haley figurine breaks, Roderick won't be able to throw it away. He's talking about the name Haley, not Yi Che. The heroine didn't even realize what had happened, because she'd never thought about it before. Seeing the young girl's sad expression, the king wondered if he'd just said something wrong. She kept making that sad face, making Roderick keep second-guessing himself. The man decided to change the subject and asked when she planned to fulfill her promise. The heroine laughed when the king suggested negotiations. That made Roderick's face warm up with a smile. He locked the heroine's hands in a grip and raised them above her head. Haley started thinking it was some kind of joke and kicked her husband. The king sat down beside her and admitted he could definitely fall asleep right away, even in this room. The warmth seeping through her body and soul was enough payment for what she was about to do tonight. As soon as the man fell asleep, the heroine cast a spell on him. She couldn't risk him waking up in the middle of it. Then she stepped into the center of the room and called out for anyone wanting to vent their deep resentment to line up first. But no one showed up. Evil spirits always zero in on weaknesses, so best to steer clear. She had to hide her fear and keep her spirit unshakable. Suddenly, the heroine remembered the amulets on the nightstand. She sprinted over and snatched them up. Her husband's voice immediately echoed in her head, how he'd refused to throw out that gift with her name on it. So she left one statue exactly where it was. Even though she doubted she could take down such a massive evil spirit, she decided to give it her all. The ghost started shouting, calling her a witch, but she was the guardian who protected the king every night. So she'd do everything possible to complete her mission. She managed to defeat it. That was a hell of a fight. But she couldn't pull it off twice in one night, so she'd deal with the rest later. Now the pendant has become even scarier. They share the same names and suffer in the same way, which makes the girl smile bitterly. But her heart felt heavy somehow. The morning of the next day arrived. As soon as Roderick woke up, he once again confirmed he could fall asleep anywhere as long as the queen was nearby. Looking at the figurine, he wondered, had it really been that worn out? After a few days, King Roderick picked up a new habit, sleeping in Haley's room. After spending a night in the king's room, the main character realized something new. He lived in that kind of place with no preparation or protection, so you could safely say he had incredible willpower. But Haley didn't want to leave him alone in that room and started begging him every day to sleep with her. The king kept trying to get close to Haley and wouldn't let go of his embrace, clueless about everything. But with every time, she doubted more and more if she could afford such a luxury. Honesty matters in relationships, but Haley was hiding too much. One day, she took another walk by the lake. Ever since then, that weird spirit never showed up again, and the main character started wondering if she'd been too pushy. Out of nowhere, she spotted Lawrence right in front of her. As the man rushed toward her, the real Haley's emotions started to stir again. The protagonist realized she had to run, fast, but her legs refused to budge. The knight bowed, apologizing for his rough behavior toward Her Majesty. But he begged the queen to let him speak with her at least once. She agreed in the end, and they were left alone. Lawrence had only one question to ask. The protagonist instantly noticed his eyes were full of sincerity and anxiety. But they should be directed at the real Haley, not her. Lawrence had heard about the accident the day before the wedding that nearly killed her. He wanted to know if it was because of him. The man couldn't grasp why she would commit such a terrible act when he'd already made a promise. Lawrence wanted to be with her as a knight, but the protagonist told him not to. Whatever was between them had ended long ago. If Lawrence can't let go of his hopes, Haley won't be able to rest either. The blonde guy asked, confused, why she's crying now. The main heroine didn't notice again. She ran off, driven by her true feelings, knowing she'd never have that kind of love. But somehow, the girl wanted to leave behind someone so precious. As always, the king knew the heroine had cried today. Roderick asked, annoyed, if she still planned to cheat on him with her ex. But the heroine said that was ridiculous. For some reason, this drove the king absolutely crazy. He couldn't figure out how desperately she loved that jerk, crying so easily just by looking at his face. But it was a simple misunderstanding. Haley reminded the king he'd promised not to rush her, and Roderick replied he was just asking her not to go there. However, the king had previously said he wouldn't pay any attention. Roderick squinted and asked if the situation was the same back then and now. He asked the girl if her feelings were still the same as they were back then. The main heroine couldn't hold back a laugh at his serious, stern expression. She apologized to Roderick and honestly said she hadn't even wanted to see that guy. The man tugged her cheek aside and told her to stop making that face. Otherwise, Roderick might start thinking something's going on. After the heroes finished lunch, the king told the girl he wanted to sleep in her room tonight. But Haley still had to deal with another monster, so she offered to let Roderick sleep in her room while she took his. If they split up, there's no risk of him waking up during the process. The king asked with a touch of hurt. Does she think this is punishment for what he said earlier? He really couldn't sleep without her. And every time she said that, her heart would hammer in her chest. Roderick wanted to sleep together, But if she really hated the idea, they could just call it punishment for his betrayal. Haley smiled warmly and said punishment can't be this cozy. Letting out a deep breath, the man asked if she was doing this on purpose. The heroine froze when he pushed her against the nearest wall. She hadn't expected him to try kissing her right there in the castle hallway, but Haley kissed him back instantly, the kind of kiss that always made her pulse go wild. Minutes had passed, and the girl started to think he was about to swallow her whole. As soon as he started to suffocate, the king eased back a bit. Then he suddenly spun her around, back to his chest, and hustled her toward her room's door. She was right. They needed separate beds tonight. Roderick was losing his mind. Then the man hurried out. Haley had to banish the spirits from His Majesty's chambers. But today, everything went sideways from the start. Soon, word spread. Her Majesty, the Queen, had authorized an audience. Most times, she'd smile and say she'd relay all the king's suggestions to him. Deborah told the Queen, if she didn't like something, she could just get angry. Out of nowhere, a man entered the throne room and blurted on the spot that it had been hard to see her lately. Duke Duncan apologized for not booking an appointment in advance. The maid whispered he'd arrived suddenly, saying he needed to speak with Her Majesty. Still, Haley wanted to meet him at least once. Her father immediately asked when she planned to take someone from the family estate. The heroine replied she didn't need to. Then the Duke asked the king to finally reinstate her brother to his post. But Haley just said, "You should handle this yourself." The Duke gritted his teeth to hold back his rage and requested to speak alone. Deborah gave a warning look, signaling they shouldn't do that. But Her Majesty agreed and told everyone in the room to leave them be. Eventually, all the extra people cleared out of the throne room. Albert barked through his anger. "What the hell are you doing right now?" She's doing absolutely nothing for her family, which is on the verge of collapse. Duke Duncan isn't her father, so he's wasting his anger now. No one knows the real Haley is already dead, and she'd be unhappy if the main character didn't at least get mad for her once. So the girl reminded the Duke, "I never asked to be made a queen." But in the end, he was the one who destroyed his own daughter's life. Albert screamed, "You'll definitely regret this. If the family falls apart, you won't come out unscathed either." Haley spoke in a quiet voice, asking her father to at least stop doing evil right now. The Duke left the throne room without saying a word. Soon the king found out that today his queen was at it again, showing off her usual drama. The heroine reminded everyone she'd already said she had a temper that couldn't be tamed. Roderick asked how bad she hated her father, and the girl said she just preferred to tune him out. But now she seemed to be hiding her real feelings. So the king decided to admit he found her really intriguing. The heroine hadn't expected such a confession, so she blushed furiously in an instant. Then the man wanted to show her something, so the heroes had to climb up the tower's giant spiral staircase. Roderick remembered Haley was obsessed with King Arthur. She'd even borrowed royal family tree records to read. The first king believed some divine power protected the royal line. This tower had portraits of every king before him, so Roderick wanted to show Haley. On the portrait of Cayenne's founding king, the heroine recognized the guy. His spirit had been haunting her. Haley sat outside, staring into the distance as she processed everything. Turns out that spirit was a king. And suddenly, he appeared right in front of her, saying he'd died at almost 40. Haley let out a scream, and the man said he'd kept his charm until the bitter end. He's still just as much of a charmer today. But the main character couldn't figure out how he managed to look so young at 40. The former king replied cryptically, "The beauty of being human is the ability to make your own decisions. Those consumed by deep resentment become vengeful spirits, and those with great ideals break the rules." Haley didn't know what his ideals were, but as a guardian spirit, he could at least lend a hand. But the dead aren't allowed to interfere with the living. The first king warned the girl, "At this rate, you'll be dead before long." The main character shouted in outrage, "You don't even care about your descendants!" The ghost's appearance shifted, and he reminded the queen of who she was talking to. An armed conflict broke out at the western border. The knights managed to quell it, and the border's quiet now. The king roughly reminded them, "I already gave orders to crush any forces trying to resurrect Damon." Now the commander let his guard down and allowed a surprise attack. Albert gave the king a sly smile and suggested holding the Western Guard commander accountable. But Roderick asked them not to worry. He'd handle it properly once he got a full report. In the end, the king ordered Jade to head west. The commander wasn't happy with this decision, since the king might flip out again. But thinking about the queen eased his nerves. During the fourth king's reign, 3 major houses were married off to unite the kingdoms. They were Mellon, Rossell, and Duncan. The Duncan family traces its roots to Daemon, and the West is already stirring with Daemon forces. Plus, the Duke suddenly brought up his son. The previous king was right to suspect a Daemon alliance. The question was whether Duncan still held that power. They became Daemon nobles because of a unique strength that vanished after the fifth king's reign. Roderick immediately ordered the queen brought to him, even if she didn't want it. He couldn't trust the West to Albert Duncan. The heroine brought the gift she'd promised earlier. Even though Roderick kept telling himself not to trust Duncan's, he couldn't resist this girl's charm. Her creation nearly tickled him into a fit, and he begged her to keep filling the world with these weird things. Then the king suggested heading to bed. But from the get-go, everything went sideways. Roderick pushes Haley onto the bed, and their lips instantly collide in a blazing, insatiable kiss. Haley quickly regains her composure, shoves the king away. She didn't come here for this. Truth is, she's mortified. Roderick mutters, "You think I should be the one feeling guilty?" He asks Haley to kiss him. His gaze drops as she leans in, just brushing her lips against his. She's all rushed but still careful. Roderick can't help but smirk proudly. Haley, hurt, asks, "You're laughing at me?" The king just finds that even funnier. Haley burrows under the covers, pouting, "I'm going to sleep now." Roderick ruffles her hair, suppressing his laughter. "Don't be mad, okay?" Midnight. Roderick wakes up. She's not beside him. He cracks his eyes open, sees her sitting in the middle of the room in just her nightgown. He immediately snaps, "What are you doing?" Haley turns around, flustered. "Sorry, Your Highness. I didn't mean to wake you." Haley explains, "I was just meditating." But the guy lifted her up and told her to get some more sleep until it lightens up. The main character messed up because she was sure she wouldn't wake him up. But of course, the opposite happened. She was just trying to help the kid's soul out. The ghost was furious no one could help him back then, so now he was ready to torment everyone. Roderick didn't get how much longer he could pretend not to see Haley's lies. The main character's to-do list wasn't moving forward. And on top of that, she couldn't exorcise the ghost yesterday. But right now, the thing bugging her most is heading to the river where Haley jumped. It was definitely near the temple in the capital, but the main character needed permission to leave the castle grounds, so she decided to go talk to His Majesty. As she stepped into the hallway, she bumped into the king, who was already smiling the second he saw her. Roderick said he wanted to grab lunch with her, so before that, they could take a walk and catch up. Actually, someone came to the castle that Roderick wanted to introduce to his queen. She told him she wanted to ask for permission to go outside the castle. The guy didn't mind at first, but the second she mentioned wanting to go to the temple, his expression shifted. He snapped right back, asking if she really planned to keep treating him like a fool. The king definitely wouldn't let Haley go to the temple. If she brought up the temple again, the king would have to fill in that river, and every other one around it, without hesitation. The main character was about to explain, but Roderick cut her off, worried it'd only make him angrier. Just then, a man appeared in front of them. Someone Haley had never met before. The guy looked just like the king, so the girl couldn't help but wonder who the heck he was. Roderick told the queen, "This is my younger brother, Edgar." The brothers looked almost exactly alike, but the main character still couldn't remember if she'd met him before Haley's death. Over dinner, Edgar mentioned how his brother had gone on and on about Her Majesty until he was ready to spit nails. But the truth was, Roderick kept griping because he was terrified someone else might swoop in and charm the queen. The main character, blushing, asked the prince to keep eating, but he just chuckled and said, "Call me Edgar." Haley asked what he did for fun, and the prince practically beamed. "Honestly, I just wander around doing research." She actually found herself jealous of his free spirit. The girl wanted to see the world too. The king pouted and said making that face was uncalled for. If she really wanted to go, they could do it together. The king would even make time for it. But Haley wanted to go to the temple by herself. She reminded him she'd promised not to do anything reckless, so she wouldn't hurt herself. Edgar cut in, suggesting a solo walk to clear their heads. "Don't make a scene at dinner," the prince said, handing her the dish. Haley didn't have a clue how he managed to set it all up. The king told her to eat up so she could finally grow up. After 3 days, the nobles stopped gossiping when Prince Edgar got promoted to border commander. Roderick, as the king's representative, ordered his brother to guard the kingdom from the last of the Daemon forces. Duke Duncan was the original pick for the role. Haley told the king their auras were totally different. Roderick explained his brother was the brains of the family, a bookworm since day one. Haley didn't get why they'd send a bookworm to the frontier, but she was more curious why the king wanted to send his brother there, until the king turned the question back on her. Roderick said her hair color and other stuff point to her family having roots in the Daemon Empire. In other words, Haley's family was the king's enemy. Then the king started going over every guest at the event and what they brought to the table. This was more like a lecture, But Haley was confused. Why was Roderick spilling all this? The Duncaons were his enemies, after all. The king was dead certain she'd never sell him out. Our heroine's heart instantly warmed, and she just wanted to stick by this amazing guy forever. The day of the prince's send-off ceremony rolled around. Roderick felt bad about how things went down, but he promised his brother he'd get to do what he loved once things settled. He wasn't sending Edgar West to get killed. In case something happened to him, the younger brother could step up and take charge of the country. The heroine's eyes went wide the second she heard that. Haley had no clue what to do if the king thought something could happen to him. Horror locked her body up when she walked into His Majesty's bedroom that night. Everything went back to how it was. The king's room was crawling with evil spirits again. Main heroine collapsed to her knees, completely clueless why the talismans weren't doing a damn thing. All this was for nothing, and Haley's body and soul were already at their breaking point. Roderick got spooked by the girl and immediately offered to call a doctor. Then he spotted the shattered figurine and went wide-eyed with shock as Haley's tears kept pouring out. The king figured he'd messed up and immediately started apologizing. Roderick promised that even if they all turned to dust, he'd treasure them as long as she stopped crying. But Haley just burst into even harder sobs when she realized the one on the floor was the exact figurine they'd named Ichje. Despair swallowed her whole. Roderick snatched up the shards and, totally flustered, promised they'd treasure them. Looks didn't matter. He should treasure them. It's only natural. Haley pushed herself up, and the king nervously asked if she was definitely all right. He begged her to explain, swearing he wouldn't hurt her. Forcing a smile, Haley said she was just tired and suggested heading to bed. But it was a total lie. Anyone could see it. At some point, waiting for King Roderick to fall asleep turned into a full-on battle. Of course, no one could fall asleep after seeing such a sight, but the protagonist had to endure it almost every day. She didn't understand how you could treat this person like that. Until her strength ran out, the protagonist was determined to fight to the very end. The Yamra figurine is still in one piece, and Haley won't fight with her bare hands. The protagonist always wanted to follow wherever both her feet and her heart took her. But deep down, she was always a lone wanderer, trudging through empty, desolate land. A human heart never wavers, and Haley was dead set on protecting the king. Even knowing all the risks, the protagonist was powerless. Her heart still aches for him, and the young woman can't fight it. A person should never bow to darkness, and the heroine wasn't about to. The moment morning sunlight hit the window, the king awoke and felt Haley on him. His eyes went wide in panic as he gently turned her over. The girl's face, including her hair and nightgown, was smeared with crimson blood. Roderick immediately started shouting for the guards to bring the royal physician to the room. The doctor declared that Her Majesty is fine, but her symptoms are beyond worldly knowledge. The main heroine let out a raspy sound. The king rushed to the bed too, and the girl confusedly asked in a soft voice, "Why are there so many people in the room?" She'd used the amulets all night to banish half the spirits, but then passed out. Haley panicked when she noticed the king was bleeding. The man gently clasped her hand and explained, "It's actually her who's been bleeding all this time." He desperately begged her to tell him what the hell was going on. Roderick was shaking because he'd seen his close friend bleeding out right beside him. Besides, Haley always says things he doesn't get. She hesitantly asked him to leave for her room, fearing her words might ruin the king's mood. Roderick agreed, but insisted on carrying her there personally. As he carried her, the main heroine lost consciousness again, mid-journey. Now the room held only the two of them. Roderick leaned in and demanded the truth, exactly where she hurt and why this was happening. If he knew the truth, he might at least be able to protect her. But Haley didn't want to say. She'd barely managed to give this man peaceful nights. The king realized it was really tough to lay bare his weaknesses. But if the girl does that, he can protect her and fight by her side. The protagonist bit her lip, not getting how long he planned to keep this up. She hated herself for not being able to say it straight, and felt awful and gross about it. So Haley pushed the king away and begged why the hell he should fight for her. She's a strange person, totally different, and Roderick knows that, but he's still trying to get to the bottom of her. Her voice cracked into a shout, and she begged him not to even try to understand her, because it's easier this way for her. Haley knew she couldn't handle it if the king looked at her like that too. She'd learned how to breathe so she wouldn't die from the pain. Just from where she stood now, she wanted him to let her do something. The man gripped her hands and quietly asked how he could possibly do that. Haley didn't even realize what face she was making as she tried to push him off. He pleaded with her not to say things like that about herself. She was still his wife. Roderick desperately promised to protect her at any cost if she told him the truth.